Oh, what the hell's going on? Yes, thank you, chat, for reminding me how late we are. But that's okay. This is a show worth waiting for. It's Mixed Bag Panel. It's number, what number are we at? We're at number 5, you guys. It's already number 5. I can't believe it. It's going great. So we have some guests tonight, some exciting guests. I'll bring the first one up. He'll introduce himself, where you can find him, some of his background and whatnot. Welcome to the stage, Austin Peterson.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jim Bob. It's an honor. Appreciate it. It's good to see you again. Yeah, people call me AP for Liberty. You can find me everywhere, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, but probably the best place to catch me is on my Wake Up America show. So if you go to rumble.com/AP for Liberty, I've got a 5-day-a-week morning talk show. It's a great way to start your day, stay informed about what's happening in the world, and yeah, keep up to date with everything in the world of liberty. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. And Jay, let the audience know.
Yeah, Jay Dyer. I cover everything from geopolitics to movies, film symbolism, esoterica, religious debates, open panel madness, feral wine moms with Virginia Slims in their mouth calling in to argue and rap battle with me, literally. I also do the 4th hour of the Alex Jones Show every Friday. Yeah, that's it. Got a few books. You can find me over at Jay's Analysis or on YouTube under Jay Dyer or on Twitter as well and Instagram.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for being here, Jay. One of the first things Austin said is, I said, oh, we have other panelists like Jay. And he said, we're not going to talk about God, are we? I said, no. It could come up, but this is a more relaxed, sort of fun. We try to stay a little bit away from like the meta and the philosophy because we like it, but it could bore some people. But we do want to get into some technology. And I actually wanted to start with this. Jay's been covering, smart cities and these concepts for many years now, and now people are starting to really hone in on what it is. Someone like Patrick Wood, I think his name is, wrote these great books where he outlines all of the companies, why they're positioning themselves the way they are. And from my view, it kind of looks like this. If you're a big company and you could mass produce and be the explicit provider of all products and services, well, the next step would be take ownership in this over the city, right? And take some sort of stake in the city, kind of like BlackRock seems to be doing. And this is an interesting topic because it seems that technology companies, along with products and service companies, are looking at cities now as platforms. Now, that sounds wacky, right? We go, what's a platform? Oh, it's the thing on my phone I use. Are you on that platform? Well, platforms come with TOS, and they come with community guidelines and all these things. So what if a city was owned by a company, and the company had TOS and community guidelines that in a way maybe replaced, your Bill of Rights, your basically everything we know about how to behave in society? I think that's the plan. It might be hyperbolic. I don't think so. But I did want to get your take, Austin. I'm actually let Jay give a summary of that. see if I missed anything. But I did want to take your position, Austin, because as a libertarian, I wanted to know from you how you see that progressing, and if there's any red flags that might come up from the principled view of libertarianism, because it seems like if a company can take over a city, a company can take over larger than a city, and if they buy it, in a way, it's fair game, right? So, Jay, give a quick summary of smart cities and what you think, and then I'll let Austin tackle that hard question.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned this idea of cities as platforms. I remember watching Vitalik, the co-creator of Ethereum, not too long ago, talk about the possibility of creating cities as platforms, and they're marketing it, at least in the crypto side, and maybe even Trump has given a nod at times to the idea of freedom cities. I don't exactly know what that means, but the idea is that, well, there will be smart cities. It's unavoidable. So maybe we can have like a libertarian smart city where it's freedom oriented versus, I don't know, Google and Bill Gates's smart city, which will not be freedom oriented. It will be, oriented towards, I'm sure, carbon credits, controlling your movements, rationing meat, all the things that we would expect a dystopian smart city to be. I think the idea comes out of the technocratic movement in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, which was kind of a weird fringe version of socialism at the time. And it kind of got resurrected when Brzezinski wrote Between Two Ages. There was always technocrats. There was always people in different power strata or strata of the power structure that believed in technocracy and thought they could have these plastic computer AI cities of the future. But I think Brzezinski really breathed new life into it with Between Two Ages. It ended up being something that the Rockefellers thought was a great idea. They put a lot of money behind it, promoting it, and it really became U.S. policy officially throughout the Cold War. And then the corporation Silicon Valley I view as a bunch of kind of private corporate partnerships that also adopted this model under a veneer of libertarianism. So that's the danger, I think, is that it'll be sold as convenience, security, utopia, and even the ones that are billed as kind of libertarian, I would be very suspicious of.
Yeah, before you answer to this, Austin, welcome to the stage, Chad. Thanks for sorting that out. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Let us know where we can find you and what you're all about.
Yeah, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Sorry, I was having internet complications at the most convenient time. So, so my name is Chad O. Jackson. I am an independent researcher and business owner here in Dallas, Texas. I'm also a film producer or co-producer, I should say. I can be found on YouTube at Chad O. Jackson, as well as Instagram at Chad O. Jackson and X at Chad O. Jackson. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm not a
Republican.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. You're not a what?
I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm politically interested, but I don't believe that any of the political parties or anything like that have the answer to our problems. I believe that most of the problems that we have can be handled at the individual or ground level. So that's my take on politics, or that's the approach that I take on politics. So
got it. All right. Well, thank you for that, Austin. Now, you see the challenge of this question, right? The smart city complex, as Jay and I laid it out in our various ways. Bigger companies owning more of everything and having a natural or unnatural monopoly on it. You decide. But the thing is, what occurs now? Like, what's your take from a libertarian position? What are some of the advantages you see? But are there some things that you're going, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something off here about companies taking over like this?
Not so much. I do like what I'm hearing from Chad and Jay, and I definitely think that there's a little Chad and a little Jay inside of me, right? So maybe they're the angels on my shoulder, but how can corporations possibly screw things up more than the government already has? I mean, how can you not be excited about a little bit of an experiment with anarcho-capitalism? How can you not look at what Javier Milei is doing in Argentina and not be like, Ron Swanson, slash it, slash it, slash it, and have an opportunity for Samsung, who builds these beautiful cell phones that I love. My Galaxy Samsung S21 Ultra. You know, there's a little community outside of Seoul, speaking of South Korea, where our phones are manufactured. This is a really fascinating case of what you guys are talking about. It's a modern private city called Songdo, built from scratch, 1,500 acres of reclaimed land. It's a smart city known for its advanced technology, eco-friendly design, high-quality infrastructure developed by Gale International and the Incheon Metropolitan City Songdo. It's a new model of urban development focusing on sustainability, technology, and the quality of life. Do you think that they could do worse than they're going to do worse than San Francisco? Do you think the people in South Korea, the corporations that build these, are going to let their private property turn into what our major cities are turning into here in the United States? You know, there is no utopia, right? There's not going to be a perfect city, there's some cities that are better than others. There are some cities that are doing better than others, but there is no such thing as a fully private city, and there's no such thing as a fully government city. Every city and every country has aspects of both market and then government control. The only few times that there have ever been like real true experiments to try and set up privatized communities, most of the time it's failed miserably. But that's because they got chased out either by local tribes or governments come in and try to prevent them from setting them up. So, let people experiment a little bit. Let these cities come to fruition. Let people try and live there. Epcot, remember Epcot? The whole experiment of Epcot was supposed to be this new city of the future. It didn't really work out. Walt Disney World is not bad, but Epcot didn't become that perfect shining example of a private city that everybody wanted to live at. Turns out people don't really actually enjoy living in those types of communities, but they should have the choice to do it. And a corporation certainly isn't going to do any worse than Gavin Newsom of California and whoever the mayor of San Francisco is at this point. I mean, I think those are good arguments. What do you gentlemen think?
I'll let either of the two on the bottom respond to that.
Go ahead, Chad.
Go ahead, Chad.
I think I follow what's going on here. Although I was a little late to the show. When it comes to smart cities, that's what we were talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Smart cities. I do think that when you look at technological advances over the course of the last 50 years, it makes me wonder, how will we advance, quote unquote, technologically over the next 50 years? So I think smart cities are to some extent inevitable. I am totally against the federalization of such cities or taxpayer dollars going to such cities on a state or federal level. When it comes to the local level, however, if some random city in the middle of, Washington or where have you, wish to utilize whatever local tax dollars to build this thing as a kind of experiment, I mean, go ahead. But there is a lot of issues that come up as a result of these things, namely intrusive surveillance and other such issues. So I think people should think twice. I mean, I know for me, in the city that I live here in Texas, we're pretty much like-minded insofar that if some politician comes out of nowhere who's wet behind the ears and have these big visions and ideas about how to change the city and how to make us more tourist friendly, this person is typically laughed at a court, because we tend to be people who want for our government to be small. We don't want our property taxes raised, and so we want for our councilmen to be a lot of boring old guys who don't have any ideas or any visions about anything. Just keep things the way they are, because we don't want you to build the next Disneyland at the expense of our tax dollars. And so, understandably, in a country as ideologically diverse as ours, you're going to see more and more of these cities coming up or popping up. I mean, when you see the technological advances just in smart homes, a lot of people's homes, I mean, the business that I own happens to be in the construction kind of industry. And we're seeing a lot of these smart homes popping up where you can talk to your house and you can set the oven just at the
house rights. I call it the direction toward house rights. No, yeah, I think your summary there is good, because I do agree with the inevitability of some of these things, but then pointing out, like, well, what are some of the things that we might not be able to foresee, or some of us might be? Jay, do you see anything that was missing in Chad or Austin's assessment of this?
Yeah, I think they brought up really good points. I didn't hear anything I disagree with. The only thing I would take issue with maybe is just, for me, I mean, just from a practical perspective, it looks like the same structure that would build the smart city, whether it's Gavin Newsom trying to do it or whether it's Google. I mean, to me, it's like the same. I don't really see a huge difference between the two, because for so long we've had really controlled by a military industrial complex that is essentially a uniparty, that is a public-private partnership, secret deep state that runs everything. So to me, it's going to be the same thing, whether it's marketed as Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook city or whether it's marketed as Vitalik's Ethereum city. Like, to me, I think it's going to be the same. I just see a lot of this as irrelevance. You could look at, for example, the structure of how in the Cold War, right before the Cold War set off, you could look at the way that Lenin structured cities and tried to utilize corporatism. Stalin also tried to utilize corporatism. So I don't really see a huge difference between corporatism and private, what's called free market libertarian governance. To me, it all ends up being the same thing in practice. And what we end up debating is a lot of ideals. We end up debating, but in theory, the city that's truly voluntaristic and anarcho-capitalist would be so much better. Yeah, but like, where is that, right? To me, it's no different than Marx's end goal of the withering away of the state and the final freedom that's going to result from Marxism. And so for me, again, I like a lot of libertarian ideas. I was libertarian for a while when I was younger. To me, it's just like, at the end of the day, they kind of have the same presuppositions, which are materialism, which are essentially the highest goals of man are temporal gains, pleasure, security, safety. Those end up being the highest things to attain to. And so when they measure societies on the basis of what is a good society versus a bad society, it's always something like that. So it never transcends those values into valuing things that are in any way ever transcendent. There's never a notion of the good. The good is always presumed. There's never a notion of what freedom actually is, or freedom to be what, freedom to do what. It's always just freedom. And so because it's anti-metaphysics most of the time, because it's an Enlightenment philosophy, it's always just kind of put out there as sort of generic ideas of freedom, liberty, quality of life, or something like that. So anyway, that's my take. Yeah.
I wanted to get more into something specific regarding what Jay's pointing to, is like practical things. I saw a comment. Thanks for that. Right now we have this system where, we're on platforms, and I used platform as a term to that cities will eventually be seen as platforms. But if that's the case, and we're pissed about a company who's woke, DEI woke, don't say this, don't say that. If a company does run a city, and from your view, Austin, it's principled, so great. But it seems like the people who do pursue these company-run cities, like Jay said, it's all going to be Google, these kind of things, and their philosophy is going to actually dominate what the behavior of the city is. And what I mean by that is, maybe Austin wakes up in the city, thinks it's awesome, we're progressing here. You start your coffee machine, right? And there's a little I'm sorry, Austin, your tweet last week violated blah, 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 and you agreed to this in your, crypto agreement, right? Suddenly you can't make coffee. These little things add up. It's not even necessarily a big thing, because guess what? If you can't make your coffee, you'll find an alternative, great. But it's not like you're going to get up and move because you didn't get your coffee because the company shut off that particular aspect of your life, but maybe they add it. Maybe they say you can't go to the gym now, right? Maybe they say, and so these are not fantasies. This is an extrapolation of what we see now with corporations owning shit, right? And being able to tell you the ethics that you ought follow if you're going to be on their platform. And so you'd say, well, no, that's just an agreement. But what if they can just change the agreement once you're already in the apartment, right? The Amazon, well, we call them coom pods, but you're in the pod and it's going great. And then suddenly you start getting these notifications, right? Like that's what we're pointing to, at least I'm pointing to when I go, are there any red flags with these views? Fine. Let's say they're not utopian, like Austin says. I think they're tied a little bit to some vision, but let's say they just we try them, right? Does that seem inevitable, Austin, that the woke corporations who are actually ahead of the game in all of this, by the way, they're going to institute the same kind of bullshit TOS for you to get your coffee. Sorry, buddy, shower's not today. You don't get a shower today. So what do you, is that has to be something you admittedly concede and say, well, yeah, that could be a big issue, right?
No, for sure. And I mean, like, one thing I would say though first is that, like, you have to consider that those things are happening right now, and they're happening under the current system that we have now. But what I'm advocating for is, excuse me, something a little bit different. But like, you know, it presupposing in this also too is like that the business owner and the person who builds the coffee machine doesn't have some rights as well. I mean, there is like such a thing as a private contract. Like if I want to create a contract with someone and say, I want to create a coffee machine that if one day I want to shut it off, then I should be able to have the right to create something like that. Who are you to tell me that I shouldn't be allowed to create that kind of a private contract? Now, we all live in the United States, and I agree that we should have a Bill of Rights and a Constitution, and that people should have rights, and that we should elect representatives to govern us to solve some of these problems, right? So I'm not an anarcho-capitalist, so I don't believe in a completely, private utopia, because one, I don't think that could exist, because two, the times that it has been tried, it hasn't worked successfully, just like socialist utopias have failed spectacularly and phenomenally. We have a lot more examples of socialist utopias that have failed. Jamestown in New Guyana, where everybody drank the Kool-Aid and killed themselves. Perfect example of a socialist utopia, right? That went wrong. North Korea. We have example after example after example, but we have so few examples on the other side. And you even said that. You pointed it out and said, well, where does this exist? Where has this existed, right? Fordlandia was an example of Henry Ford trying to create a community that was based on a utopian ideal that was mostly market-based. The corporation of Ford in the rubber plants, where they were, harvesting rubber for the tires, where they set up this community. And Ford was a very conservative man. He wanted to have conservative values, and he tried to impose them on the community of people in Fordlandia, which included workers were not allowed to drink alcohol. They had curfews. They had very strict rules, as exactly what you're talking about right here. And it failed. So the thing is that these utopian experiments that we're discussing right now, I don't think that they exist. They can't exist in a vacuum. And in the very few times where the experiments have been tried, again, whether it's the socialist utopia of Jamestown or whether it was Fordlandia created by Henry Ford, those utopian experiments always fall apart because reality has a way of getting in the way of people's dreams to centrally plan a society. It didn't work with Epcot Center. It didn't work with Jamestown. It didn't work with Fordlandia, right? What tends to work are people who are able to make individual choices on a level with a certain basis of rights, a modicum of movement of freedom that they're allowed to have to be able to make their own decisions, and then to go out and transact and to contract to get all the goods and services that they need to accomplish whatever their goals are in their life. So really what we're at the end of the day, what you're talking about is still central planning, right? Whether it's a corporation or whether it's a government, like it's still something that I oppose in principle, this concept of central planning, which does tend to fall apart because one of us can never be as smart as all of us. And it's not that there's no plan. is that there's more planners, right? And individuals are free to make these decisions about what coffee companies they want to contract with. But again, these utopian experiments tend to fail on their own merits, because their idealism usually just it can't work in reality, because people are people and they're individuals and they make their own decisions. And sometimes, if somebody may want to break their contract with the coffee company that they entered into, and for that, you're going to need a court to step in and to adjudicate a dispute. So there's always going to be some layer of a regulation on a corporation that's going to be some neutral arbiter third party. It's always going to exist, whether or not anarcho-capitalists say it should. It should be all private courts as well. There's going to be some outside regulatory force. The question is what that looks like, and how the rest of us can manage ourselves and manage society on our own, absent of some central vision and central plan handed down from us from a Politburo, if you know what I mean.
Well, you said one thing there, and I'll let Jay or Chad jump in here, is that you said, well, even in the corporate city, you do have rights. Well, I'm actually saying, what if all of the materialists and all of these coomers coming up are going to say, well, I actually don't care much about rights. Give me stuff, right? Give me stuff. Give me a conveyor belt subscription to my own life. Let me sit in the city and I'll trade off my liberties, and I'll abandon that construct and I'll trade it for another construct. Now, what do you say to those people? Because regardless of whether you think it's going to fail or succeed, right? I agree with you that these things fail. I think because they fundamentally don't account for other aspects of being a human being, which includes transcendental categories and things like this that we value actually more in the end. But regardless, if someone goes into the city and goes, hey, this is great, I get 3 to 5 years here, and they give you everything you can imagine, right?
You can't sell yourself into slavery, right? So the 13th Amendment, no indentured servitude,
right?
No slavery. You can't.
But you can willfully forfeit your rights through a contract.
Yeah,
can't you?
I don't see something like that happening. I think most people don't want to live in the pod or eat the bugs. Are there people who absolutely listen? Jonestown happened. People drank the Kool-Aid. They committed suicide out in the jungle. There are absolutely people who do that. Like those people. There are people who want to live in a cult. How are you going to stop people from living in cults? Okay, there are cults. There are still cults. You're never going to stop people entirely from living in cults, right? You want to try and minimize it and encourage free thought, but you can't force people not to be in cults. It's impossible. There's too many cults, and we're all prone to cult thinking. Anyways, continue.
Well, one thing that I would say, a couple things, is that it's not so much just a matter of do people join cults just because people are cult-like. You can also have an intentional top-down degradation of the population through weaponized culture, and that's something that's existed for a long time, but particularly throughout the Cold War, pop culture was from the top down, both corporate and private and government, in a like dual operation, toxified to degrade the population. And this is something that the libertarians typically miss or not aware of. I'm not accusing you guys of that. I'm just saying that in my experience of a lot of debates, libertarians, they will sort of pass over this idea of toxic culture, which is created by the establishment to degrade the population so that they become pliable and ready to go into these kinds of settings and basically rat mazes is what I would say these smart cities will be. So my question to you guys would be, let's say, I mean, surely some of us probably have worked at a Fortune 100, Fortune 500 company at some point, right? I've worked for a couple of them. In my mind, the smart city run by one of these Fortune, it's going to be like living at work. Okay. Yeah. And I remember working at a Fortune 100 company, and I had a fat bitch manager screaming in my face, managing every little thing I did. And it was a nightmare. So I can't imagine that living in it. So if I'm given that, but with my coon pod, like that's going to be somehow a better thing. So my question is just that you said something earlier, like, why not let Sony have a spot at running a smart city? And I'm like, I mean, dude, that's going to be the same fat bitch manager, maybe even an AI fat bitch manager telling what you can eat, what you can do.
An AI manager.
Yeah, right. Like she pops in on the hologram, right, while you're in the toilet, and it's like,
and they force her to be overweight, so their representation and all that
accurately represent actual managers and corporations, which are all fat chicks, by the way.
Yeah, they have to. Listen, we're gonna shift a tiny bit here. I think we got a good chunk of meat in there. Chad, we were talking just before in the green room about how we pick. I think that people pick famous people, right, and they approach them at this point, especially. I think this has always been the case, but now I think it's even more rampant. And Jay's covered this a bunch, where you seek a spokesperson who's flashy, charismatic, talks loud, whatever, is pretty. And you approach them and you go, hey, you want to, yeah. Well, you want to work for NATO? It's underneath the radar though. Like, can you push some of these narratives? Don't worry, you're doing a good thing. Don't you want to be bigger than the scripts that you read that you didn't actually create? Yeah, I know. I'm going to be great. I'll, Jesse Smollett. I'm going to put a noose around my neck. I love it. So we've seen this now. Chad, you've done some decent work on MLK, and you get a lot of backlash, right? I think MLK Jr. is one of those people where, whether or not it's organic in the beginning, that's not the point. The point is there are agencies that can sniff out influential people, right? The blue check marks of the 50s and 60s existed, and so you find them, you sort of groom them in a way, and then you have them become a product. I think you and I would agree, maybe Jay too, I'm not sure Austin's take on this, that someone like Martin Luther King Jr. was definitely utilized to the advantage of some other people, and to push certain things and certain certain outcomes, right? But now we have this. Jay, you did a little bit on I mentioned NATO. It was NATO, right? With Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Now, we were all called like complete lunatics when we'd say, well, no, there is culture creation. A lot of work has been done in this regard. Is go back to the sexual revolution and all of this. We can document it. We can look at it. So the question is today, is this running out of steam? Right? This I think the veil is dropping, where you start to see, well, there's more famous people, so there's some saturation now. So they don't have the same influence of like Muhammad Ali being like, oh, I'm going to do this thing, and and everyone's all like, yeah, that guy. Well, so many people are this now that it's almost making it sterile in a way, which I think is not a bad thing. But I'm wondering, is the veil dropped? Jay, you've covered this. Is it dropped? Are people already seeing, well, famous people, they just really don't have much influence now. They kind of blew it. I think they blew it with the Karunka. We can't say the other word on YouTube, but I think they utilized too many talking heads, and everyone's like, wait, how is this possible that every single person with a bright bleached smile ends up being on the same, basically like a board of directors side of big pharma? This doesn't make sense. So is it over? Yeah. Is it the end of this, Jay?
I don't think it's over. Oh, sorry.
Okay, good. No, Chad, go ahead. Why don't you go?
Yeah, I don't think it's over. I think that they've grown more sophisticated in the way that they carry out these kind of agendas. And more often than not, you'll find that the celebrity or the individual in question themselves aren't really privy to exactly what it is they're a part of. I would say that LeBron James and his dealings with China he's not a very smart person. I don't think he knows what he's up to or how he's being used, but he's definitely being used in the same vein as, say, a Paul Robeson circa 1908, who was being used by 1908, 1918, 1919, 1920 area. He was a full-blown communist. And I think he was more aware of how he was being used and all too willing to be used in the same way that MLK was. But I don't think LeBron James is fully aware of what's going on. But again, they've grown more sophisticated, because over the course of the 20th century, what we've seen is the so-called expert class influencing the trajectory of our country These were the ones who were acting as the kind of brain trust, if you will, of the FDR administration, both Republican and Democrat administrations throughout the course of the 20th century. I mean, the whole political theatrics of it all, where you think that you're pulling the lever for one party's agenda over the others, when in reality, it's just one uniparty. This isn't anything new. This has been the case for a very long time. The veil is breaking, so to speak, insofar that folks like myself and you, Jim Bob, and Jay, and others are growing more aware of how ideological subversion works. But I think part of the reason of that is because we know what the word ideological subversion is. We know about Yuri Bezmenov sitting down with J. Edgar Griffin in 1984, talking to us about the way in which the KGB and the Soviet Union influenced ideological subversion, cultural demoralization here in the United States. And so we're aware of how this thing works. And even though someone like Yuri Bezmenov was able to put into a nicely packed 4-point process of how ideological subversion works, that's more for our understanding. The reality is it doesn't actually quite work out in exactly those 4 stages. It's kind of zigzag in the way that it truly works. We learn because we are all educated by the same mass compulsory public school education system. We understand everything in phases and bullet points, and this is the way that we understand things. And so part of Yuri's genius is that he understands the way that we were educated in the West. And so he gave us a framework to understand how ideological subversion works. But the reality is when the rubber hits the road, it's more zigzag and more kind of fluid in reality. So we don't know at a given time whether we're in a stage of normalization or crisis or destabilization or demoralization. Sometimes all these things are happening simultaneously, but they're happening nonetheless. The point being to make the public think that everything is happening in a vacuum or everything's organic. There's no hidden hand behind whatever is going on at a given time. And then along comes some, bright smiling politician saying that he has the answers if you would only vote for him or support his policy. And for the sake of safety and security, we end up pulling the lever for that politician, not realizing that the whole time, the whole point was to empower the federal government all the more at the expense of the rights and the freedoms of the American people. So this thing continues to happen over and over again. And I think politicians in the expert class today are working simultaneously to that end. And so that's the sophistication of it all.
And entertainment, you add the element of entertainment as well, which has never been as accessible. Like technology allowed entertainment and high production value to be ubiquitous, such that we can have a show like this. I mean, imagine this panel right now, this show, this quality, 40 years ago, it'd be like, what the hell who do you know? But now everybody has that. And so I would, everything you said, Chad, but add in the technological aspect that, actually kind of adds to the confusion in a sense, but it also allows us to seek out alternative views and information so that we can, it's like a double-edged sword. Like, you open it up to everybody, so you get more garbage like YouTube. There's going to be 85% garbage. What's the Pareto principle? 80-20. And then what? You have to find out the truth of the matter, but some people say we're even in post-truth. So like people don't even care that it's fake. You see this with AI stuff. You go, that's an AI influencer. The person goes, I don't care. They're filling this thing that I need, and that's the value. The value isn't that it's real or breathing or authentic or has a soul or it's this other thing. And I think that's true for politics at some level, where if the character fits and they say all the right lines, I think there's enough metadata they have access that you say X, you could probably predict a movement to the right or to the left to some extent. I'm not saying there's an effective Wizard of Oz who really can do it all. I think it ends up being quite a mess, right? So I'm not that big of a conspiratard, but I'm a little bit. I earned a helmet, but I'm not that bad.
Right. I agree. Listen, Phil, I think Chad is definitely right on the money. And I liked your point made by Jim Bob, where you talked about control over the culture. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm very white pilled, right? I very much am an optimist and see a lot of good things in our future, maybe short-term pessimistic, long-term optimistic. Because I'll say this, like when you think about the Hollywood system and how it used to be so much easier to control the media and the message, right? There have been sort of, information revolutions that have been occurring. In our lifetime, there have been several information revolutions, not just because of the medium with which how we're able to spread information, but how we can also broadcast information and who is considered to be credible in terms of public information, right? When I was a child, there were, 5-6 networks, how many, 5 or 6 news shows, and only one, Walter Cronkite was like the most credible person in reporting. And even with the Pareto principle, if like there's 20% good information, 80% bad, right? That's a low, noise signal to noise ratio there. But at least the tools are available for people like us to get the information. I mean, we are in some sense the elites because we are seeking out that information, and you are able to control 320 people who are going to listen to this show live, what I think the numbers are, right? It used to be that when we had 4 or 5 channels, 1 million people were watch a show, and that barely ever exists anywhere except online in the media. If you get 1 million people on live, like you're talking about breaking like a stream or something like that. It does happen, like you get close. But mostly what we see with like the biggest information streamers now, like Dan Bongino, I think he got like 800 or 900,000 people watching live at some point, and it was like the biggest stream in all of history ever, and that was just recently. So there has been a power change. Can corporations and ne'er-do-wells come in and control their voice? And yes, sure, but I mean, the mob is even more powerful now than it used to be. The mob has more tools to uncover corruption. I mean, how many times are we saying? I mean, Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX and the fraud that was uncovered at FTX was uncovered pretty damn fast. Bernie Madoff, I think it took them like over a decade to reveal his fraud. Enron, for example, like everything is speeding up now. I mean, including the speed of the scams, but also the justice that's occurred. Because let's be honest, we frequently do not get justice from our justice system, which is why you see, sometimes unfortunately cancel culture mobs that will destroy a person unjustly. But because there's such a desire for people to know the truth about the people who are spreading information, find out who they're connected to, you do get justice. You do find out, people who are public figures that are pedophiles a lot faster than you would have found out years ago. People might have gone their whole lives and you didn't know that they had these associations either to Jeffrey Epstein or, God, you could probably find a dozen people in the media that, you don't know their names, but they had a small following and they got busted talking to a 12-year-old girl in a park because some kid with a cell phone was able to go out and record them and capture them and play the role of what used to be To Catch a Predator. Now everybody's To Catch a Predator, right? So
that's what the policing would be in the smart cities. It would just be like a mob of bees ready to sting someone, right? Maybe unjustly. But
the smart city will mandate that you meet your pedo quota every day.
Right.
Crazier than that, but. So there's a positive side to this, which is true, which is that we're at this inflection point where there's a massive war going on with controlling the voices, controlling the reach of stuff. I've dealt with this since 2016, got my whole website deleted. It's a nightmare to fight, but also at the same time, we're at a point where we're starting to have some victories. And it's not just in like alternative media and speaking about these kinds of issues. I mean, it's other areas as well, like Cat Williams talking about comedy being a gate.
There's a bunch of comedians out there that ain't never been funny, by the way. Put into your face every day like they funny.
Right.
Yeah.
No, right. And they're not. And the establishment has been doing that. There's even like non-establishment people still trying to gatekeep. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but one of the biggest things on YouTube is comedy. And there's this whole fracas in the last year on YouTube of people pointing out. It actually started with Amy Schumer and people pointing out that she was foisted on everyone and she's not funny. Then it became Brennan Schaub and everybody being forced to, supposedly you're supposed to like Brennan Schaub, and he threatened people that were making fun of his stand up. And so it's like people not understanding the way the internet works. You can't threaten your audience to not like, you better laugh, right? It's just crazy. So there's this revolution that's happening. Elon with X. I mean, whatever you think of Elon, I mean, certainly there's areas to be critical, but just in the issue of being able to have a little bit more free speech and make Twitter like the internet was in 2014 has been very good for me. My Twitter's grown well in the last year. So there are positives, there are pluses, but I think if we zoom out at the meta level and we think about this, I still just like, I'm worried that the internet itself was given to us by the public-private corporate partnership of the deep state and the Pentagon. I don't think it was given to us for freedom and liberty and libertarian values. I think that it's there ultimately. I mean, I wish, I want it to not be. I hope it's not going to be bad. There's a lot of positives. I'm pro Bitcoin. I'm pro, all of these things, but I'm also worried that it will have the effect of degrading society to the point where the future generations, Gen Z and younger, are going to actually be that blob of people who don't have any critical thinking skills and will be raised in a smart city and will be depopulated. I think that's the danger. And I don't know what the answers are. I mean, I think there are some things that we can do. I don't have any big scale solution to everything, but I mean, I'm just worried that the internet itself is also contributing to the decline. I don't know. And also in regard to Yuri Bezmenov, I mean, he's a great example of why I don't think the libertarian ethos itself is the answer. I think it has a lot of good points and a good critiques of the state. But if you look at Yuri Bezmenov, I mean, for one, everything that he says when he defected is what the CIA wanted him to say. So that's why you find, if you watch the full lectures, he goes on to talk about how we have to liberate the Eastern Europeans who are being oppressed because they can't have the butt sex, and we must give them the freedom of all the liberties of the gay. And it's like, wait a minute. So he's just another kind of tool, voicing what the CIA wanted in the Cold War. And we're actually doing the very things right now that Yuri said. So I don't know why if people have a problem with what's happening in Ukraine. I mean, Yuri said we need to liberate these people so that they can have, Skittles weddings and whatnot. So again, it's just liberty. I mean, he says some good things, but it wasn't the KGB that was running these operations in the Cold War. It was the Fortune 100, Fortune 500 running those operations, demoralized America, not the KGB. And the CEOs of the Fortune 500 were not KGB agents.
Okay, well, maybe Yuri Bezmenov was a liar, right? So it's possible that he was also full of shit, right? Because he was a Soviet. So just remember that it's possible that Yuri Bezmenov was telling us what we the anti-establishment, we the revolutionaries, right? We who are the anti-Hillary Clintons, the anti-Mitt Romneys of the world, whatever you consider yourself to be if you're not a libertarian, right? We're on this side, and Mitt Romney and Hillary Clinton and everybody else is on the others. But just because Yuri Bezmenov told us a few things that we wanted to hear doesn't mean that we ought to take Yuri Bezmenov as the gospel truth. Like, it's possible to think that Hillary Clinton is a fraud and Vladimir Putin is a murderous killer, right? Like, you don't have to buy into either narratives. And my favorite former Soviet, who I don't trust completely, is a guy by the name of Mitrochkin, who was a former KGB general who defected to the United States. And he had a whole treasure trove of not just conspiracy theories that he brought with him, but actual conspiracies that intelligence agencies overseas had perpetrated upon the American public. Americans love conspiracy theories, and the Soviets knew this. And they know that if you wanted to have power over the American people, the best way is to spread conspiracy theories, because we love it. Mostly because we're so prosperous and wealthy compared to the rest of the world that our wives, who are bored at home, or at least were in the 1950s and the Cold War until the 80s, They love conspiracy theories. The bored housewives, man, you see them on Twitter now because now they have social media and they're out there spreading the 9/11 inside job. Oswald didn't shoot alone they've got nothing better to do with their lives than spread Soviet horse shit online.
So do you believe the official story
because the deep state loves it because it keeps us retarded and arguing over things like an assassination from the 1960s and whether it's important that there was somebody on a grassy knoll or not, instead of fighting about the fight that's happening right now. So like foreign intelligence agencies are just as guilty as spreading horseshit conspiracy theories that Americans love and believe, because we are believers, man. We love to believe in conspiracy theories.
But don't you think that when somebody defects, they're going to they're going to put out what? Well, you haven't let me finish yet. You don't know what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
You don't think that they're going to say what their new masters want?
No, I think they're going to say whatever's going to make sure that they get the champagne and the Coca-Cola flowing, and that's going to get them the benefit.
And that would be what the CIA wants, right?
Perhaps, maybe, but just
Jay,
just because the CIA says something doesn't mean it's wrong. Adolf Hitler drank water, right? So the truth can be the truth, even just because the CIA says it.
You're accusing me of a fallacy, which I didn't argue.
Well,
I didn't argue that.
But my point is that Yuri Bezmenov, some of what he said was ostensibly true, and some of what he said I think was ostensibly false. Right, so you got to be careful, especially when we talk about Soviet defectors, because a lot of those people, they weren't necessarily defectors; they were still working on the sides of the Soviets. Some of them were double agents.
Okay, I understand people have that theory, but let me give you an example. So again, he says that one of the things that has to happen is that we have to support the efforts of the West and the CIA in the Cold War because of the fact that there's a lot of oppressed people on the other side of the Iron Curtain in the Eastern Bloc countries who don't have access to Coke, Pepsi, and gay marriage. So what I'm saying is that is the CIA's line during the Cold War. They adopted through the Congress for Cultural Freedom the liberal policy of social ethics and liberal art ideas. That's why they funded modern art, abstract art, all of that. So if you understand the dominance of the CIA in American pop culture from the 1960s all the way up into the 1980s.
But that was smart, Jay. That worked, right? That was effective. I mean, you're making the CIA's point for them. I mean, they funded jazz artists, they funded American artists.
Feminism.
Yeah, it worked,
and it worked. I mean, their goal,
put us in the situation
their job.
of
I mean,
the
CIA aren't necessarily ideologues, right? They don't necessarily operate in an ideological fashion like we do. Right, so their mission changes based on the administration that controls them. The mission of the CIA from the 1950s.
That's a total normie narrative about what the CIA
from the 1950s. Kill Castro and kill Che Guevara. It's not the same mission as the CIA.
It's a totally normie narrative of what the CIA is and what they do.
Jay, you've been drinking a lot of Kool-Aid yourself. It sounds like you want to believe the alternative mainstream narratives that agree with you completely entirely. And it's possible that maybe the mainstream narrative is horse shit.
Drinking Kool-Aid. So what specifically have I drank Kool-Aid
shit that comes out of InfoWars on a daily basis because you want to sell us dick pills. And the establishment wants to sell us dick pills.
So no arguments.
And, whether I buy my dick pills from
you're going to low tier stuff.
Whether I buy my dick pills from Pfizer or whether
you don't have an actual argument. So right,
you're both selling
you want to have an actual debate, or you want to go into dick pill shit?
I'm telling you that you are not immune to the same corruption that the establishment is engaged in. Just because you say you're against the establishment, you can still spread the same horse shit. Yuri Bezmenov.
That doesn't prove that I've actually done that. So these are all non-argument statements.
Wait, so
how does that prove I've actually done that? By saying that it's possible for someone to spread misinformation. That's not an argument.
I'm sorry.
So wait, do you
have a
think?
Specific
wait, Austin, do you think
misinformation?
Yeah, do you think Jay through InfoWars, are you saying that he's part of a disinfo thing, or that it's just possible?
I'm saying that, building on my point, from people who are bored tend to believe in conspiracy theories, that what Yuri Bezmenov spread here in the United States may not have been the entire truth, and that things like just because the CIA says something doesn't mean that it's wrong. They may say something that's true on one day, and they may say something that's a lie, but their job is.
You haven't made an argument yet. It's all straw men. None of
Okay,
those.
I'm not talking about your argument. How can I straw man my own argument? I'm only saying
You're not.
this is
So
my
you're not
argument.
addressing my argument then.
Okay, well, I didn't hear a question. It may have cut out. So did you ask a question?
No, a question is not an argument.
Okay,
So
what is your
if
argument?
you're not addressing the arguments I made, then there was no reason to go to dick pills and
What would you
misinformation.
What would you like me to address, Jay?
Well, let's go back to the CIA and the Cold War. You said it was effective, and I didn't question whether it was effective or not. My point was that they adopted and utilized the arts and the principles of degeneracy as a form of cultural warfare.
I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about your degeneracy. Like, I don't sit around.
Well,
I don't
then
sit around.
exactly.
I don't.
That's why
I don't care. Like, I'm
Wait,
not.
you
I'm
don't
not
care that society.
Jay, no, I'm not. I don't
and
care.
This is why. This
I
is
don't, I'm
why
not like you,
libertarians
dude.
are
I don't sit
absolutely
around thinking
useless.
about butt sex all the time, bro.
That's
I'm not
why you guys are
with,
useless.
I'm not obsessed with butt
You
sex.
don't care
like you
about
are, bro.
right. You don't. care.
You are obsessed with butt
You
sex.
made my point.
You can't stop thinking about it, and it's your primary goal in life is to stop
primary
stop
goal
people
is
from
butt
having butt
sex.
sex.
No,
I don't
that's the
identify with that.
That's you
'cause I
guys.
don't give a
dude.
Hold on, hold on,
All
hold on,
you guys
hold on,
wanna
hold
do
on,
is be
hold on.
consumers.
Hold on a second.
Libertarian
Hold on.
coupons.
Hold on a second, Jay. Hold on. Austin, if what we're talking about is cultural and ideological subversion, right?
Yes.
Would you say
He just said
that
he doesn't care.
right? Well, do you get what about
Listen, I'm in favor of cultural and ideological subversion. We're engaging in it right now. We want to subvert the culture. Who wants to? We don't want to keep the culture the same.
No,
I'm not a
obviously
conservative.
I'm not
a conservative. I'm
an
a
idiot.
revolutionary.
You
I
literally
want,
have.
I
So-
want revolution. I am.
So
a
what? Wait,
mind
hold on,
stirring
hold on,
thought.
hold on, hold on a second.
I'm almost done. Don't get it twisted here. I don't want an old world order. I want a new world order. I want things to be changed. I don't want things to be how they were. I want Bitcoin. I want monetary reform. I want to end the Federal Reserve. I want to see Hillary Clinton in jail. I want to see Donald Trump be president. I want to see a revolution. I want to see things get shaken up because I don't want things to be the same. I don't have.
You have no ethic, no
that I don't want to
no
preserve.
worldview. All you have is subjective libertarian pleasure principle.
Okay,
AKA
well, the things you made up,
world
the
that we're
shit you
going
made up in
into
your
is
head is
your
your
world.
fixed and fast moral principle, but mine is completely subjective. But yours is completely objective.
You literally just
completely
argued that it
based
was.
on something and based
is.
in facts
Yeah.
and reality.
Right. That's why you don't even know what a fallacy is. You've made multiple fallacies already in this discussion
Okay,
because you can't separate subjective argumentation from objective.
So, Austin, I want to ask you if cultural subversion, if you're for it, you're not for every version of it, right?
no, I'm for my own.
That's okay.
Okay, so
Okay,
what
great.
is the-
Okay.
so,
I'm
right, so
for
what's
my
the
cultural
ethics?
subversion.
So what's
Right,
the
so-
basis for ethics here?
Oh God, please! Nico-Machian ethics. I'm not going to get into like ancient Greece and Marcus Aurelius. Right, I'm not going to sit down. I'm not going to sit down and talk Marcus Aurelius or Stoicism and
Here, Jay,
Epicurian-
hold on.
You're making arguments that we need to adopt this. Dude, can you answer this or not? Right, and then you're saying I want Nicomachean ethics, but I don't want to answer for what it means to go to ancient Greek ethics. That is
I don't because I think that shit's boring, bro. And
I don't care that you think it's boring. You need a basis for your ethics.
Listen, if you don't think that I have a fixed moral principle and a standard, that's fine.
What is it?
We won't agree on that.
No, I want to know the argument for it.
But let's
That's a
talk about
different
what
thing.
people give a shit about. Nobody cares about ancient Greece.
Everybody
Jay.
in this audience cares about it because you came with a moral.
No, they do not
You can't justify. Yes, they do.
The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. Marcus Aurelius. There's the basis of my ethics.
Are you reading memes?
Marcus Aurelius. I'm reading Marcus Aurelius.
Hold on.
Let me accept Stoic ethics. Exactly. Silence.
Did somebody? I didn't hear you say.
Why should we accept Stoic ethics?
Oh my God! All right,
listen. You don't want to answer it, right?
No, I don't because I think it's a pointless discussion.
Because you don't have an answer. That's
Jay.
the point.
Jay, hold on. Let me ask a different. Let me ask a different way. Is there any degeneracy that you point to that we ought not pursue in society?
Are you asking me?
Does the term degeneracy mean anything to you at all?
Yeah, to some extent, we probably wouldn't share the same definition of what degeneracy
And what defines
is,
that?
right?
What makes it? What makes
To
that?
degenerate, right? So to the actual literal definition of
I
degenerate.
don't know the definition of the word.
To have a
What is
something
the
of a
standard in
positive
your
quality
worldview by which you judge
and to have it
something
degenerate.
degenerate?
But I'm not like Jay Dyer. I don't sit around worrying about the butt sex, right? It's not the top of my concerns
Yeah,
for
so
society.
kids don't matter. You
People
don't think it
might be
matters
having
that
butt
kids
sex.
about-
Oh my
what about
God!
kids
it's
are being
degenerate.
indoctrinated,
We've
dummy.
got to stop them from
Wait,
having
hold on,
sex.
hold on.
This is the
Hold on.
dumbest, lowest
Hold on.
IQ
Hey,
libertarian
Jay,
I've
wait,
ever
Jay,
talked
let me take it one step at a time here. Is the current culture that I call degeneracy, and Jay does as well, are they pushing that on children?
Yes, and as
Does that matter?
someone-
Does
Is
that
it
matter?
wrong?
Yes,
Is
yes.
it wrong?
And as a man who got booed when I ran for president for saying you should not be allowed to sell drugs to children, I can tell you that there are moral standards and principles
what are they?
lines that you do not cross.
And
Okay.
what are they?
So there are absolutely some moral standards and
What
precepts.
are they? What's the basis?
But I draw the line at children.
He won't answer.
So I
they
just
can't.
answered. I draw the line at children.
What
There
are
it is.
they? What are the standards?
I just said I
No, you
draw the
didn't.
line at
You
children.
stated your personal opinion. I want to
consenting
know what the objective
adults-
standard is.
But consenting adults are a different matter. So
What is the
consenting
basis of that being the standard
one thing.
apart from listen? You're being arbitrary. You understand? In philosophy, you can't be arbitrary.
Yes, I can do whatever the fuck I want. It's a free
There we
country.
go. So
I can
not
be
in a debate.
arbitrary when I want to be arbitrary.
Not in
and
a
I can be
debate.
concise
You
when I
can't
want
do
to be
whatever the fuck. You
concise.
just lost the debate by saying I can do whatever I want in a debate.
I
That's the
could.
difference.
Yes, of course I can. Yeah, of course I can do it. This isn't a
That's why you're an
debate
idiot,
format.
because you don't know.
Jim Bob even
You're
said at the
bound by
beginning,
the laws
we
of
can do whatever
logic
we
in
want.
debate.
It's not a hard debate format, so I can do whatever I want. I can say whatever I like.
You don't even understand that
however
doing
I
it doesn't mean that you're. I'm talking about following the laws of debate, the laws of logic. So you
Okay.
think you can commit fallacies and the arguments are still good?
Okay, Mr. Yuri Bezmenov is everything.
So you're going back
has the same mission from the 1950s until today, right? So
Hey,
like,
Austin,
you
let me
can
tell
make
you.
shit up
Hold
the
on,
spot.
hold on,
You
Jay,
can make
Jay.
shit up. Jay can make shit up on the spot, but I have
Hold
to
on,
go all the way
hold
back
on.
to Greece and
Hold on, I'm gonna
prove
mute.
why
I'm gonna
Marcus
mute.
Aurelius
I'm gonna
was
mute.
true.
I'm gonna mute both of you. Hold on a second. I have a question. I'm gonna bring it back on tracks in a way that still follows the where this is going. You, Austin, you do appeal. Your foundation, would you say, is based on rights?
Am I unmuted? Okay, yes.
Yeah, rights.
Yes.
Okay, and so from your view, is it fair to ask what these rights are?
Oh, of course it is.
Okay, so what are rights from your view here? All right, would you agree that a right? Would you agree with the definition that a right is an entitlement absent a duty?
Yes, that's a pretty close to the technical definition of what a right is. A right, like the simplest way to explain it is that as a right is a guarantee.
Okay, so if a right is an entitlement absent a duty, from your view, when you say, well, I have a concept of degenerate, right? There's some degeneration of something. So there's a positive thing that's unraveling. Let's call it a fabric, right? So let's say from all of our views, there's a fabric. And when we see that fabric unraveling, we call it degenerate. We call it degeneration, right? That's a clear visual way to say it. So my question is, if a right is an entitlement absent duty, where do you get the duty to defend rights from?
Where do you get the duty to defend these rights from?
Yeah.
So, could you rephrase your question in a different way?
Why?
Make it
Why
more low
ought
IQ.
we?
You need
Okay.
to make it more low IQ.
Hold on, Jay.
so
Hold
you
on,
get it.
Jay. Hold on, Jay.
Yes,
What-
because it's low IQ to
Hold on.
want to understand and
Hold
make sure
on.
you
It's okay.
understand.
It's okay. Hold on. Why? Basically, if the thing you're defending is the rights, which is an entitlement absent a duty, it entails that a duty's somewhere in there, right? Entangled. And I'm asking, like, what's from your view, from a libertarian view, what actually grounds that we ought to defend rights if they are in fact just entitlements absent the duty by definition?
Well, not everybody has to defend rights. Very few people actually do, right? It's usually a very small group of people that end up defending rights overall. So, I mean, are you asking why every person should have to defend rights, or are you?
Let's say acknowledge them.
I don't know if you're asking a tactical question here.
How about it's a philosophical question?
How about acknowledge instead of defend?
Well, a duty to acknowledge that they have. Well, I mean, it depends, right? Like, not everybody has the capacity to do that, right? That's why the rights exist to an extent to protect the liberty of people who don't even necessarily have the capacity to acknowledge it, like children, for example, right? Or the mentally deficient, right? The mentally insane, right? Those people have rights even if they don't, can't acknowledge that they have those rights. They still, just like the unborn in the womb. They can't acknowledge that they have rights, but they do have rights. They can't acknowledge they have a duty to protect those rights. So we do that on their behalf through a constitutional government.
Okay, so if someone who doesn't have the capacity to know that they have these concept of rights, and they don't have the capability of acting out the duty, right? That's not embedded in the rights, by the way. The duty is added. I'm asking. If granting someone rights that they can't actually act on, in a way you can violate their rights because they don't have the capacity to act on them, right?
Happens every day, but you shouldn't, obviously. I mean, I think abortion is a crime, and a crime against the rights of an individual. That person can't speak out on behalf of their own rights, so you have a person who speaks out for them as an intermediary. But I mean, most people do not acknowledge or have a respect for rights, or second, duty to those rights.
I got you here. Jay, let me finish this one last thing. So my question is, if Jay and I agree that someone who's walking around the street sort of not fully naked but almost, and it's, from your view, it's their liberty, they didn't steal anything, they didn't violate anyone else's rights, and they didn't take anybody's stuff or whatever. From our view, we have a duty to actually violate their autonomy, right? And from our perspective, take care of them in a sense. Now, taking care of such a person is actually a violation of their rights from your view. And that's why I ask, this is why I fundamentally reject libertarianism, having gone through a phase of it, is that if rights are just privileges absent duty, you still have to ground the duty part. And that's why Jay's asking about the ethics, because the ought claim that we ought to acknowledge rights is separate from the rights itself, right? So from my view, it all comes down to duties. And the problem with libertarianism is, if you value liberty above all things, liberty is a description of what is, right? It doesn't tell us what we ought to do with liberty. It doesn't tell us when we should violate liberty or when we shouldn't violate liberty. It just gives you a baseline.
But that's kind of the beauty of it, right? I mean, isn't that sort of the beauty of it?
Does San Francisco look beautiful? Does San Francisco look beautiful?
Well, you're not using San Francisco as an example of libertarianism, right?
No, liberty, just liberty.
Because San Francisco is like the worst example.
How about Burning Man? Burning Man?
Well, Burning Man,
that's better, right?
Much better, much more better than San Francisco. At least they clean up after themselves, right? Right, but still, again, like you ask yourself. I guess what I'm trying to understand here is, like, are you saying that people don't have rights?
No, yeah, I'm actually saying they don't have rights.
Hypothetical.
Can I make? All right. Well, I did not know. So I was not aware that you did not believe that people did.
I think they're a social construct that are left with two things: force, whatever the force is, and two, whatever the standard of ethics is that's being imposed. And we already all agree that rights, as you even say them, actually. Not everyone gets them, because you can violate them to do certain things. You can stop people from doing certain things based on their situation. So the problem is, it's the duties. I think my belief is that only duties exist. And if rights are privileges absent duties, you still need duties to exist. And from the libertarian principle, the only imperative is to seek freedom And to look at liberty or freedom as an end goal is to look at efficiency as the end goal. Well, efficiency is a description toward a goal, but it can't be the end goal, just like liberty can't be the end goal. It's actually a start point, if anything. And that's why ought claims, like Jay's pointing to, the ethics, the meta ethics, which I didn't really want to get into. It bores the shit out of everyone, except for me and maybe Jay and maybe Chad. He has a pipe, so it probably doesn't bore Chad. But it is important because if you organize a society around libertarianism, you're actually entailing that there is a meta-ethical principle that you ought to follow. And when you say something is degenerate, you're actually assuming there's a positive in which being torn apart, and we just don't know what that positive is, that fabric that's being torn apart.
Okay, I don't know that necessarily, other than the idea that we don't have rights. I'm not sure that what you and I are saying is necessarily in conflict. Some of what you're saying there is a utilitarian claim, right? You're stating that, you know, if a society existed around these fundamental ideals, so it does beg the question of, you know, whether or not that society, if it were to come into creation, would be able to fundamentally create moral goods that then could potentially be degenerated, you know, if degeneracy were introduced into that system, right? What would that degeneracy be, and how would that system be degraded through that degeneracy or that moral decline? So it seems that, you know, it doesn't sound like I'm disagreeing with much of what you're saying, other than this concept that individuals, you know, don't have rights.
No, this is where we disagree, is that when you go after Jay about like the butt stuff, is that the culture that we're seeing, right, in the West and other developed nations, is that there is a clear, deliberate pushing of certain behaviors, in this case sexual. They're not just sexual. There's drug behaviors being pushed. There's a lot of behaviors, but that specific thing is actually directed pretty much directly, explicitly toward children. And so what we're saying is that if your politics
are San Francisco metaphor, I mean, like when I confronted you on the San Francisco example, I mean, like, you don't believe San Francisco is an example of a libertarian city, right?
No, I didn't use libertarian, but it's
okay.
Liberty based. It's liberty. It's based on the concept that liberty above
that's
all.
Because there's no self-evident definition of what liberty actually is, or what your position actually is. You yourself said it was subjective, and that's why I asked you, why do you think that fallacies are able to be done in a debate? Do you not think that a debate is governed by the rules of logic and critical thinking?
Well, I never said that the definition of liberty was necessarily subjective. So talking about straw mans, I never said.
When we asked you what it was, you said,
no, you asked me for where my moral standards came from. You didn't ask me what my objective definition. You don't think
liberty is that not a value judgment?
It is a value judgment, but I never said it was subjective. So you can disagree with me, but please don't put words.
Those things are subjective. I asked you about value judgments.
Are you asking about my value judgments now?
I asked you then, and I'm asking you now.
Okay. So what about value judgments are you asking me specifically?
Where do you get the standard? Because if you're going to say there's oughts, you got to have a basis for the standard.
Okay.
Not just saying there's one.
Is it okay? Is it okay? Do I have to have one standard like you do? Or am I allowed to use multiple?
No. You don't even understand what it doesn't even understand what it means to ask.
I'm not like you guys. I don't agree. I am not a social conservative. Okay, so I do not conform to an inherently monotheistic view of society that bases all value judgments on one single standard handed down to me from on high. I don't have.
Hey, Austin, are you a?
I don't have.
Are you a
postmodernist, Austin?
He doesn't know what.
No, I'm not a postmodernist. No, I do not agree with the wokies that there is no such thing as objective truth.
Okay, so what's the basis?
What distinguishes?
But I don't believe in one truth handed to us down from on high.
No, you do. You do. You do. Hold on. No, you, Austin, you do.
I believe in an amalgam. I believe in what's called triangulation.
What's the one thing? Hold on, Austin. You said something false. You got to be corrected. Well, there is one truth. There is one truth that you rested on.
I do not believe in one metaphysical.
Yes, you do.
moral
Yes, you do.
standard
Yes, you
that is
do.
handed down
You
to us
Yes,
from
you
on
do.
high.
You understand
Hold
that
on.
that's a single.
I think that the
principle.
only way to
That's
find
your single
truth-
principle, dummy. That's
I
the
think
single
that the
principle.
only listen, Jay. I don't call you like a basement dwelling retard that looks like you smell bad and you haven't taken a shower in a month. So if you could keep the personal
I mean, if
insult,
you're gonna
you wanna
troll
have
me,
a- if
the
you want to
trolling
have a
should at least be
philosophical,
funny.
before you
That
criticize
was Reddit
others,
here,
call
dude. If
people
you're
a
gonna
dummy,
troll me, it should at
maybe you
least be
should take
funny.
a shower,
Austin,
retard. Because
Austin.
I could smell you from here and how you look. So
It's
let's
not
do
even-
it.
Did you
Austin,
copy
hold on.
paste
There is
your
the,
jokes,
there's the
dude?
concept. There's the
You copied,
concept.
so his
in
ethical standard
determining
is
what is
copied
in
and pasted
determining
on
what
me
is
as far
moral.
as jokes.
Listen, you fucking retard. I'm speaking. Okay. There is a concept to find out what is true called triangulation. And what you do is
You don't even understand that we've already
you have a
refuted
gap.
Hold on,
Let me tell you
let him-
guys how
He
logic
doesn't
works.
even understand that it's one.
Hold on, let him go.
Let me
Jay, let him
explain
Jay,
something.
let him go. Jay, let him go. Jay, let him go.
Let me explain to you how you find logic. You go out and you find information. There's an information
logic.
gathering
That's not
part.
what
You don't
logic-
start. You don't start with a conclusion.
That's not what
You
logic
don't.
even is.
You don't start with
You find
here's
it.
What's
the
a-
truth.
you
Hold
and
on.
now let me
find
find
logic.
information.
Jay, hold on. Jay, hold on a second. Let me just manage this. Austin, you said you don't stand on a single truth, right? A monolithic truth for your values. And then you said
I do not believe that truth is handed down to us from high
Okay.
as a revelation. I do not believe
Gotcha.
in
That's
a
the
revealed.
revelational
I do
single
not
Okay.
believe in a
You can't do
revealed
that.
okay.
a
on.
revealed truth. No, I do
Okay,
not.
hold on. How? And then you said you triangulate to see what's logical and true outside. And I'm asking you from both of those standards, right? From both of those statements that you don't get any revelation of what's true. You triangulate and you use rationality and reason, right? I'm asking you, well, it seems as though your foundation is actually rested on one solid brick that you assume before you can look out in the world and find it, and it's called a human right.
Well, that's only one example amongst many. See, the thing is that if these concepts, they work together just like the construction of a building, right? You have to have one pillar and then the next, and then you have to build it all on the foundation, okay? And so in order for us to determine, in my view, in order to us to determine what is true, we have to go out. We don't know what is true and then go out and find facts to support it.
Where did you find rights?
We find facts, and then we put them together.
Great.
know,
Where did you
man,
find? Where did you find?
you're
Where did you
standard
find
right.
rights? Where'd you find rights, though? Then, if your standard for epistemology and what's true is looking out and doing triangulation and reasoning, I'm asking you, how did you come to the conclusion using that method that rights exist?
Well, here's the thing. I'm willing to change my mind if I'm wrong, but I drew this conclusion based on a litany of literature that was convincing enough to me, and I would present to you.
A
and hope
litany.
you would
a
be
whole
convinced.
litany. A
A
whole
whole
litany of literature.
a whole body
Not
of
while
literature
you're a cat lady. A whole
that I
litany?
find
Was
to
it
be
a whole
convincing.
litany or a little?
All right.
So wait, literature. What if we say, well, that's what revelation is to us? So you still have a problem in your method, because you said your method is you don't start from your conclusion and you go out and find things. So let's say you found literature, right? I'm asking you, what method did you determine to say that rights exist? I'm not sure how you would possibly come to the conclusion by looking to the external world that something like rights exists.
I wrestle with that. Listen, Jim Bob, I wrestle with that, right? I wrestle with that just like I wrestle with a lot of concepts. And, I absolutely could be wrong. And, you could convince me that what I have divined from my education and my knowledge and limited experience could be incorrect. But I can only show you what I have read in regards to the natural law, in regards to, the treatises of government, John Locke, right? Life, liberty, and property. I can only point to those, right?
John
Because
Locke.
me being a secondhand purveyor of ideas, I can only show you those and say, this is what I believe to be true based on how closely it corresponds to what I believe to be reality. And I ask you to believe it as well.
Sure.
Based on whether or not you can. But I could be wrong. I'm willing to admit that.
What I observe in reality is force wins, both in the animal kingdom and the human. And so for me,
What do you mean?
This is the descriptive truth about reality in all animals and humans is that force wins. Do you disagree?
I mean, like you just mean in general, like 100% of the
Just what's-
time, or you just like in
It's
general?
always there's always force ready to go, either looming
Yeah.
or there's always force being
Yeah,
used.
yeah, I agree.
Okay.
And I mean, like,
So-
so I wrestle with that, and I'll tell you,
Okay.
I think that, you know, it's difficult to live in a society where we can balance to create a society where there is a balance against those laws of nature, right? So like just to create a civilization, if we will, is to sort of reject the fundamental root.
You mean
basis
appeal
of
to
nature.
you mean appeal to something supernatural, right?
What do you mean?
You have to reject the brute nature, right? For us to have dignity as human beings, right? To ground the value of us being human beings, which is not identical to your dog,
Right.
is something not found in nature. So we don't find these things, you know, rights assume dignity, right? But it also assumes some sort of duty. And so if we both agree the descriptive truth in premise one for the world is that force wins and force is always in action, or it's looming at least, right? It's always looming. And so if that's the case, then would you agree that it actually wouldn't be a right that informs our behavior, but rather a duty that would actually give us how we ought? Right. Okay.
Sure.
So if the truth of the matter is force wins, and that's the way of the land for animals and humans, that there's something that intervenes that isn't necessarily an entitlement. And would you say if that entitlement even existed, which I don't believe it does, you would still have to point to the duty in which informs us how we should interact with each other?
Not necessarily. I mean, you're partially right. I mean, I do think that like force wins in nature outside of what man has created. But you know, cops, courts, you know, nuclear weapons, right? The instrumentation of the state, right? So since I'm not an anarchist and I do believe in a limited government, then that means that I do believe in an artificial third party, you know, interceding in order to ensure that force doesn't always win. And I think the truth is that it doesn't, right? The fact
hold on.
Hey, wait, I'm almost done. The fact that grandma, you know, can safely go and get groceries here in mid-Missouri without having to worry about bands of highwaymen or thieves.
Because of force.
Yes, because of force, but that's introduced in a way to ensure that force doesn't always win.
The threat of force does.
The threat of force always wins?
Yeah. If you want to appeal to rights, all you're appealing to is an agreement that you have an entitlement that ought not be violated, and if it is, there's a consequence that is force, right? And so force wins is still descriptively true even in your system of rights. Now, what we're pointing to is that's actually not good enough for a society that has any sort of fundamental principles or good, a sense of a good, and these things, that you actually need to confront the problem that entitlements themselves actually just leads you down a path like we're seeing today, where now you have modifiers for entitlements. You have the gay entitlement, you have this entitlement, the black entitlement, the whatever, and you just keep adding entitlements. Now, notice how no entitlement that's ever given is ever paired with the duty. What grounds this duty that we ought to value or acknowledge entitlements at all? And from your view, you can't ground it in the natural world. It's nowhere found. And so the thing that actually makes us intervene as human beings is the assumption that we're actually not just animals. We're not just a part of nature, that something is in us that's bigger than that. And it necessarily needs to be supernatural, because you can't find these things in nature. And so we're asking you.
I can be convinced. I could be convinced of that. And certainly I'd love to see your evidence for it. And I'm willing
evidence
to
for supernatural. Well, what's the evidence of a right?
I would love to see. Listen, I'm not the one making claims. I'm not making.
You are.
I'm not making extraordinary claims.
You did. Right. A right is a supernatural.
No. Hey. Everything that I say I can point to. And
where's a right?
And verify.
Where's a right? Where's a right?
So low tier.
But listen, you're the one making extraordinary claims.
Extraordinary
claims require extraordinary. You're saying there
rights
is
exist.
Supernatural.
No.
You're working on that premise.
Our position is actually coherent
I
because
believe
it
that
actually
rights
makes sense
exist.
that there would
Rights
be
exist.
rights.
Rights
He's not
exist
gonna-
is
He's not
supernatural.
going to answer
Could
me.
you
He's
be
just
wrong?
going to talk over me.
Do you
because he's such
believe
a
that you
goof.
could be wrong about your worldview?
My
Are you
worldview.
willing? Are you willing
I
to
don't think so.
admit that
No.
your metaphysical claims could potentially be wrong?
No.
No, because metaphysics needs to be because here's why, Austin. Hold on.
See, we
First
don't
of
live
all,
in the same
no,
world.
hold on a second. Let's just go one thing at a time. Austin, you said extraordinary claims require evidence. I simply
they do.
asked you.
Yeah,
I'm
so
telling you that a right is an
where's the
extraordinary
right? Where's
claim,
the evidence
and
for
I'm
that?
asking you where the evidence. I'm telling you, Austin, as an olive branch, you already believe in the supernatural. A right is meta-natural.
God, that's cringe.
Where is it? Where is it?
God,
Where is
guys,
it?
Guys,
You're
just because,
cringe.
guys,
Because you
guys,
don't
and again,
you won't
like,
answer that
someone
question.
who's telling you that like a basis of rights that's built up
Where?
on a litany,
Your
a
basis.
foundation of
Your
scholarly
basis.
evidence.
What's
It's
your
not the
basis?
same. It's not the same thing.
What is your
claiming
basis?
as claiming
So he can't
revealed
answer
proof.
this. He
Right?
can't
It's
Where's
answer
not
the
the
right?
same
He
thing.
literally
right?
can't answer it.
It's
Where's the right?
The entire
we don't
audience
live.
sees
We
that
don't. We're
you
not
literally
dwelling.
can't
We're not
answer
even
it.
speaking. We're talking past each other.
Are there
we're not,
evidence for
because
rights?
You won't
Your
answer
claims. Your
No,
claims
you
are
won't
based on the
answer.
supernatural, and mine are
Where's
not.
where's a right?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's grounded. That's the point.
Where's the right
Yeah.
though? It's supernatural.
It's
It's not
arbitrary.
found in nature.
Well, where is your thought? Do you have thoughts? Are they in your brain?
They're
Can you tell me your
metaphysical.
thoughts?
Yeah,
No,
I
Like,
believe
if I were to
they're
open up your
metaphysical
brain, could I show you
Yeah,
a thought? But
great,
you have
great,
thoughts,
great.
right?
We both
Okay,
agree.
Do I
that-
need, do I need
This
to
is
open
good.
up your
Okay,
skull to
good.
prove that there's a thought?
yeah.
Yeah.
We good. We reject materialism. Do we both not reject materialism now, right?
No, I do not reject materialism.
Okay, so
There we
where's a
go.
right?
Huh.
So where's a right then?
I like you. So you're saying concepts?
Which
don't-
molecules make up a right?
Yeah, tell us where right is.
Well, listen. You'll have to talk to a
Listen.
brain chemist
Listen,
to explain to you what the electrical
no
symbol.
chemistry can tell you where a right is.
Okay, all right. Well, listen.
Hey, listen.
You-
hey,
you make
you
claims
have
of
an actual
supernatural.
argument or not?
I simply deny them and say I don't see that that's the case. I'm willing to believe it.
How about take
Right.
another example? How about take another example that you appeal to? Are the laws of logic real? Do you believe they exist?
The laws of logic. Do I believe that
Yeah.
they exist? Yes.
Yeah.
Where?
Okay. So
What
where do they
molecules
exist?
make up the laws of logic?
Right.
Oh my God, guys! Like you want to go on and
Yeah,
on.
so
for,
every
like,
time you
it's
can't
so
answer, you do
esoteric
this.
and
Oh my
boring.
God, guys!
It's a
really?
fair question.
No, it's
There's
so
so
boring.
much
So
literature.
listen, Socratic. You want to talk
So
about
much
Socratic debate,
literature.
right? So like,
No.
how do the laws of
So
logic
much
exist?
literature.
Well, you're asking, does Socratic debate method work? Okay.
No, that
Do
that
I need to-
requires
Do I
no.
need to explain to you like how to do the Socratic method?
Yeah,
in
we're
regards to
so
debate?
dumb. Please enlighten us. Enlighten
Yeah, Austin,
still great
Austin,
men, please
debate-
enlighten us.
Austin, debate is not the same as the laws of logic. Debate presuppose the laws of logic. We're asking you if you. I don't know why this is hard for you to concede to. You appeal to things that are not found in nature, that don't weigh or smell, or you can't see them. Right? This isn't controversial. You appeal to things that are not found as matter. Correct?
No.
You don't. Okay. So where is a right found as matter?
So right is a concept that arises from matter.
How does it arise from matter? Is
Right.
it matter?
Then you're not a materialist.
It is just because something is a concept doesn't mean that it's not material, right?
What molecules
If
make
something
up
is
a concept?
created from
What
material,
molecules make up a
it's
concept?
still material.
What
Okay.
God
molecules
damn,
make
why
up
do
a
you,
concept?
guys? This is not even an interesting
on.
conversation, and I feel bad
It
for
is.
Because
Chad.
you don't have an answer to it.
Chad,
Listen,
let's go to-
I
let's
don't
go to
mind-
Chad.
I don't mind
Hold
talking
on,
about it.
Jim
I
Bob.
just think it's boring.
He accused me. Hold on. The thing that got this all sour was that he accused me of foisting conspiracy theories. He doesn't even know what I talk about. He just assumed that because I'm on InfoWars, I foist all the conspiracy theories. Name one thing that I teach that's false, or one thing I've said false about Yuri Bezmenov. You said I just made it up. Can you explain it? Because you immediately got salty over that. No justification for those accusations.
Okay.
Well, so the question that I had for Austin was, I mean, you accused Jay of building a straw man, if I'm not mistaken, but you then use a straw man to explain Jay's view as being of wanting people not to have butt sex and basically policing people as far as their morals and things are concerned. I guess my question for you is, like, how is your view not a postmodern view? If your argument isn't based on any kind of objective understanding of truth and morality, if you are kind of adhering to this more fluid way of thinking and of having your views changed by, I guess, the next smartest person in the room, how is that not postmodern?
Well, I mean, it's, God, man, I hope you're asking that question legitimately, because postmodernism is to suggest that there is no objective truth. I do believe that there is objective truth, but I don't necessarily claim to know all of objective truth. I don't claim to know all of the answers. I only know actually, I think I know very little in regards to all of the potential of human knowledge. Most people know very little, right? So like the concept of knowledge itself, we are very limited as humans with these meat brains of what we can actually have a capacity to understand. So just because I don't know it all doesn't mean that I don't think there is an objective standard. I do. And when I find those bits of truth along the way, those very rare jewels in my search for knowledge, like I reveal them, I believe, and I'm willing to have them challenged. I'm willing to have them questioned. But I don't think I don't
detect that at all. You're not willing to have that.
You can say it, but I'm almost
you immediately went to ad hominem.
But like, I don't think you're not a postmodernist if you don't believe in a higher power. Like, you don't like. It's not Christian.
He just talks over. So he knows when there's a person.
I mean that's. Hold on, I'm almost done. Jay, you can.
So that's his whole. That's his whole modus operandi.
You can slander me in a moment, Chad.
Slander.
It's not this question. It's not theism versus postmodernism, right? You don't have to be a theist, in order to not be a postmodernist.
You do,
right? You can not be a postmodernist and not necessarily believe that the objective truth is handed down as revealed knowledge. Right? There are plenty of secularists who do not accept the postmodernist.
That's a fallacy. Do you even know what a fallacy is? Like, you just appealed to a mass fallacy, like mass appeal. Do you know what fallacies are? No.
So
he doesn't.
So Austin, would you say that your views as it relates to morality and things like that are more humanist?
Yes.
Okay.
And what is a fallacy? What's a fallacy?
Here, let Chad run this line. Let Chad run this line. Go ahead, Chad.
So break that down, if you will. So you would be more humanist in your, I guess, moral worldview.
Yeah, I consider myself a secular humanist in the sense that I think that the concerns of humanity and of material concerns, things on this planet, should be the primary concern for humans and not that which is celestial, right? So that's that's how I would define,
So why did you immediately go to the ad hominems?
Did you want to follow up with that, Chad?
You're not going to answer. So he's just going to ignore me because you went to ad hominems first. You said you wanted to be challenged. You don't want to be challenged.
No, I don't roll around in the mud with pigs because you both get dirty and the pig enjoys it.
So you want to be challenged. When you're challenged, you go to ad hominems. Why?
Okay. So Chad,
you're not going to answer.
Is your question then essentially? He
doesn't have answers. So
and I don't want to put words in your mouth.
He's an enlightened single gay man. He's an enlightened.
Jay, hold on. Chad hasn't talked a lot. I actually want to see where he runs this. I want to see where he runs it.
So I mean, like
after the pipe.
Is postmodernism, like secularism and humanism aren't intrinsically tied to postmodernism?
How aren't they?
Well,
you say they're. You say
well,
they're not.
I mean, I'm here on the example in front of you, right? So I believe that there are objective moral standards, and that truth is a real concept that exists, right? But it's not ever changing. Now, our knowledge and our understanding of it may be changing, because when I say I think I know the truth, I could be wrong, and I'm willing to change my mind if you provide evidence that contradicts my beliefs and my worldview, my understanding, or you provide facts that contradict, and you're able to effectively persuade me. But the truth was the truth, even if I didn't understand it. A postmodernist would say the truth changes, or I'm living my truth. And that's not what I'm saying. And that's
But wait,
not
hold on a second. You are saying that, and here's how. Because if you're a materialist and truth and the logic and these things are material and they come from a mechanism called the brain, then these are just kind of like effects that come from a machine, right? And so those effects could change. Like, how could you say one group of molecules called the truth from a brain is true and another group of molecules from another brain is false? I don't know how you're going to say the truth
one is just incorrect.
Yeah,
Right?
but
One
that
is just-
appeals to the chemical reactions again to another brain, right? And so this is why materialism should be rejected wholesale, because when you say, well, Chad just said a truth, but that just came from his brain. It's just an emergent property of a machine. And then you say, well, that's true for what you just said, right? Austin, you have to
Not
say
exactly.
yes.
Not
It is.
exactly.
How could it not be? How could it not be?
There's a lot of complicated concepts in what you've said, right? And so, there's a lot to unpack there. But I don't know that necessarily materialism is, requires one to believe in an unfixed concept of what is true, right? I believe the opposite of that. So I do think that materialism and objective reality and objective truth, like, they all exist within the same plane or the same sphere.
Here, let's go to aesthetic. Let's go to aesthetics. That's good.
I'm
Thanks
gonna
for
head
the
out. Hey, if this
All
guy's
right.
not going to answer any questions, there's no point me being here really. So,
All right. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate
yeah.
it.
Well, good luck with being a single gay man in an apartment with a lot of books.
Oh, okay. Well, good luck with obsessing over gay sex, you smegma smelling retard. See you later.
You don't even have good jokes, dude. At least if you're going to make a good joke.
Okay.
Come on,
Well,
I got a rebel
hopefully a
tooth.
bath is in.
You
Hopefully a
could've made
bath is
fun of
in
my
your
tooth.
future.
I got a rebel tooth. The best you've got is
Hopefully tonight a bath is in your future, dude. Wash your hair. Use shampoo,
Good one.
right?
Yeah,
And like
shampoo,
drink the
washing hair.
fluoridated water.
Jokes, dude.
Right? Don't forget to run the fluoridated water through
I'm
your
fun
tap.
as a single gay man in an
Don't let
apartment.
the CIA chip mind control you. Anyways, can we please have a different discussion?
Okay,
You want to discuss aesthetics?
Austin, yeah, what is your reason for saying something is more beautiful than something else?
Well, that I think is probably subjective, but I mean, like, I have my own tastes and interests, but I mean, I don't know that beauty is in itself a constant, other than, like, I would say some few standards that I look at in nature, like, are universally accepted by most people, but there are people who reject concepts of beauty that I love and enjoy and appreciate and desire. But I don't know that necessarily. I think beauty and truth are closely aligned, but not necessarily intrinsically linked.
Okay, because the aesthetic, it brings up a point, because if something's true, if there's something called beauty at all, then it would be objective. And so the same would go for morality. And so that's why when we talk about truth, especially when we're informing a society how it should be structured, it's really important to ask these questions. And they haven't been answered in a long time, or asked in a long time. Since the Enlightenment, it's not an accident. The Enlightenment is basically the underlying fabric of the American project, and it just says, "Well, we just have rights," and we go, "Wait a second, like, what do you mean we just have rights? Where do these come from?" That's why I'm asking. That's why I'm pestering you on rights. But as far as what Chad was pointing to, like, if the truth is just. If you say the truth can't change, but the truth is actually just changing, morphing material molecules, I'm not sure how you can hold the position that the truth doesn't change if it is, in fact, an effect of physics. Like, because you're basically saying my effect of physics is different than your effect of physics.
No, I'm not. I wish you would stop saying that. I'm not saying that those are changing. Those are changing. I'm not saying that. You're trying to foist. I feel as if you want to try and foist this postmodernist worldview on me, and
materialism.
I don't know how many times. I have to, like, tell you.
No, forget postmodern.
Maybe I have like the most unique worldview of anyone you have ever met, but I really wish you would not lump me in with
I didn't say postmodern.
Right. But like Marxists and like typical statist atheists who believe in unfixed, unfoundational views of morality and of truth.
Is it fair?
I don't think it's fair to lump me in with those people, because I'm very clearly articulating a very different worldview.
Is it fair to say that it's possible that you have similar or exact starting points?
No.
Materialism is true. Is that a starting point?
I believe materialism to be
Okay.
true. Yeah,
Do-
but I don't.
okay.
I don't necessarily start my whole fundamental concepts of morality with materialism.
Well, what do you know? I want to make sure you know what I mean by materialism, not like buying shit consumerism, right? Because that's something too. I'm talking
Yes,
about
I understand. I'm
physical.
talking about the physical world, right? Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Okay, yeah. So the problem with the view itself, it actually does lead to subjectivism, and that's why Chad is asking, because postmodernism does reduce to moral relativism and epistemic relativism. And so I guess when you say, if you actually make the statement, truth is just, this effect of the brain, right? Statements are just an effect of the brain, and
No,
you said
that's not what I'm saying.
So what is truth if it's not an effect of the brain then to you?
Well, first of all, truth, whether a brain acknowledges truth or not, is immaterial, right? Before humankind existed, truth existed, right? Facts existed, right? There were fixed, immobile points, and those things exist whether or not we acknowledge them.
Okay, so you just said something. Let me just put it back to you. You said before human minds, truth exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is truth conceptual and absolute?
Yes.
Okay, is truth are concepts tied to a mind? Are they mind dependent?
I don't necessarily believe that. All right, like I don't have a strong opinion on that question, but I do think that they can be independent of, like, what we're talking about is the measurement of it, right? So we're not talking about the truth itself, because the mind, right, the consciousness is the measurement of truth, and the what do we call it? An abstraction, right? So the mind generates it as an abstraction, right, in order for us to understand it. But it's true whether or not the mind measures it or not.
So then it's not dependent on the description then. You're saying, and I agree, that the truth exists independent of whether a human mind properly or improperly apprehends and describes it, okay?
Right, which is not a postmodernist view.
Okay, forget postmodernism. Let's just look at this, is that if you say that, and we agree that truth precedes the human mind, then it's not dependent on the human mind to describe it. It does exist, right? But here's the thing. You said, well, you don't think truth is dependent on a mind, right? Well, you're assuming that a mind doesn't exist before the human minds. Tell me one concept.
I'm not assuming that. I'm not an atheist, right? So like there absolutely could be a mind that existed before humankind. You could be right. There could be a single monotheistic, God, the God of the Bible, the God of the, I don't reject that as false, because I can't disprove that, right? Just like there are a lot of things I can't disprove, right? So I'm not working on that assumption. I'm merely working on that which I think can be provable, right, to the best of my knowledge. That's how I operate, and I recognize that knowledge to be limited, not unlimited.
Okay, because that's the thing, is like, if you do accept truth as absolute and unchanging, and you do think it's mind dependent, well, then you do need a mind.
No, I don't think it's mind dependent.
But how is it?
Truth is unchanging, but I don't think it's mind dependent.
Okay, when you say truth isn't mind dependent, right? If truth is conceptual, how can a concept not be mind dependent?
How can a concept not be mind? I think a concept is mind dependent.
Truth is a concept.
Well, it is in our understanding of it. It is in our understanding of truth. It is a concept, right? It is an abstraction that our brain generates in order to interpret the universe as we see it, the world as we see it. So in our minds, it exists as a concept, but it also exists as a fixed point, whether or not we recognize it or our brains measure it as such. And I do have to apologize. I do have to run here in just a few minutes, because I got to get up early for another show.
Okay, no worries. Chad, do you have any other questions? I want to see if there's any super chats for either of you, just so people aren't Big Papa Flannel wants in on the action. Chat loves this. Thank you, Base Beard. Oh yeah, the beauty one is a good question. Aesthetics is always interesting in these conversations. Slowboard, Slowboy Whiteboard, Burning Man attendees are infamous for dumping trash and supplies in nearby towns as they travel home, just like the Libertarian verbally dumping here. Oof. Liz, oh my, Jay muted. Yeah. Well, it can get out of control, and that's fine, but it has to be reined in. Frankie D, 9.99. Jay, I've been really struggling with Nietzsche's master versus slave morality. Lately, I can't find a single refutation for his framework. The only thing I can think of, it would be the tag kind of argument. Yeah, Frankie, thanks for the super chat. Be sure to go over to Jay and find that. Ask him that. 10 gifted memberships. I appreciate it. Jay looking very Russian with the windbreaker. Yeah. So, Chad, do you want to any other lines for Austin before he leaves?
Well, I mean, so I'm familiar with Austin from when he ran for president back in the day. But other than that, I wasn't real sure what his, I guess, worldview was or what have you. I'm not a libertarian, and I have a lot of criticisms of libertarianism myself, but I will say that I think it's fascinating kind of toward the end, Austin, that you said you're not an atheist, because everything that you said up until this very point would lead me to believe, just from observance kind of perspective, that you are an atheist. Would you say you're more agnostic, or like what's your view?
Yeah, I can say. Oh yeah, and thank you for that good faith question, Chad. Yes, I consider myself to be an agnostic. And I mean, I'm an atheist in the same way you're an atheist, right? Like, you don't believe in like the millions of other gods, right? So in that sense, but you don't call yourself an atheist. You don't call yourself an a-Mohammedist, right? You actively just don't believe, right? So in that sense, that's how I sort of apply it. But I also think that it would be it's illogical. It would be illogical for me to say on one hand, well, you can't prove all of your claims of the supernatural if I can't then disprove them. I just happen to find the evidence on the other side to be more compelling. But there have been conceptions of metaphysics that I have heard that I find very compelling and very interesting, and I do listen to my religious friends, and was raised in a very religious upbringing. But I think agnosticism is a morally honest position. It's in the honest position to state is to claim, because you cannot disprove that there is what you're saying, Jim Bob, a revealed truth, a revealed reality. Like, that could be true. And I think it would be, intellectually dishonest to close yourself off to the possibility of such, because to say that there is no God is to say, like, you've closed off the opportunity of there being a revealed truth to such, because knowing how limited, the human mind is, and our capability of understanding the universe, there could be some great and almighty force and power that could be higher than ourselves. And I'm willing to believe that if presented with sufficient evidence. And I think that that's a more morally upstanding and intellectually honest view to take, is the agnostic view of such. But with that does come doubts and skepticism.
Well, I mean, so my observation of what you just said, taken into consideration with everything else you just said, just with your conversation with Jay, I'm having a hard time understanding, because, on the one hand, you say you're a revolutionary, but on the other hand, everything that you lay out as far as your agnosticism and the basis of your agnosticism is exactly, in my opinion, the goal of the American public school system. It seems as though our public school system has an interest in churning out agnostics, as it were, exactly what you just laid out. So to what degree are you revolutionary? What is it exactly that you're trying to revolutionize? Because it seems like you're just a byproduct of the public school system.
Really think that the philosophy of Thomas Paine, is not a revolutionary philosophy? You think that that view, like the art, that.
No,
you don't think
it is a revolutionary philosophy.
Those are revolutionary philosophies, right? And they are absolutely in line with the spirit of 1776, right? Not everybody who was a founding father was, a Bible-believing Christian in the same way George Washington was, or John Adams was, right? There was a panoply of views amongst those things. So my philosophy is absolutely at odds with what public education would have, because Agnosticism is not what public schools teach. They teach a religion. And to me, postmodernism and wokeism operates on a religious foundation, right? Marxism operates very much in a cult mentality. It has followers, it has tenets, it has holy books. That's not agnosticism in any understanding that I have.
Yeah, but so does libertarianism.
We've been discussing that tonight. Nice to see you, Andrew, by the way.
Oh, hey, Austin. How are you?
You came in right on the tail end, right before I leave. But,
yeah, I was watching some of the exchange. I thought,
but I do not agree with postmodernism or with the idea. I don't agree with what you said, Chad, that schools want people to be agnostic. No, they want them to be believers. Public schools want children to believe in the tenets of Marxism and in the tenets and the ethos of postmodernism. That's not agnosticism. That's true believers. So I'll leave it with that.
Well, I thought, Austin, before you went, if you got just a minute, I thought I could clarify what it was that these guys were getting at. So the problem with Jim Bob is he's fucking philosophy bros, with their
flowery language.
I'm listening. I'm listening. I need water. Continue.
All right. Yeah, with their bullshit flowery language and all their dumb philosophy terms, you know what I mean? They never can seem to get out what it is that they're trying to say.
Just say the fucking thing, right?
Just say it. So Austin, what they were trying to get at is the principle of libertarianism operates off of the non-aggression principle. You would agree that that's true, right?
No,
it doesn't operate off the non-aggression principle.
Not in my view, but I mean, libertarians see me as a heretic for that, for making that claim.
What is what's kind of the pillar that holds up the version of libertarianism that you have?
Well, there's not a singular pillar for me. Like it's more like a four columns here holding something together. But things like private property rights, individual liberty, right? These are concepts, the rights of man, right? So there's more than one.
So private property, non-aggression principle. You own yourself, you own your property, you have certain inalienable rights which are axiomatic to the principles of your worldview. So they're the starting foundations of your worldview. Correct. So what these guys are saying, and what Jim Bob is saying specifically, is he's saying, well, Austin, rights don't actually exist. When you say the word right, you just mean the word force. You're using them interchangeably. So he's saying, when you say I have a right to do X, he's saying that right doesn't exist absent your ability to enforce that right. It's a principle only of the mind, which is a subjective category. So it's a social construction. When you say right, you just mean an entitlement absent duty. And so those require force. So without that non-aggression principle, the way that libertarians reconcile these two concepts is they say, well, our society has to run on non-aggression. Otherwise, we have to concede that it always just runs on force. So inside your worldview,
no, you could be right.
Everything runs on force, right? Everything has to run on force.
Maybe that's why I'm a bad libertarian, because that really is not how I've conceptualized my concept of libertarianism. And I'd love to sit here and argue with you all evening about it, Andrew, but it's 7 o'clock. I've been going for 2
problem,
hours.
man.
I got to get up early. I wish I had more time, but yeah, I do reject the non-aggression principle. I think that libertarians, have replaced, just like Marxists replaced that with government, like libertarians replace their axiomatic concept of a non-aggression principle. I think is naive.
Well, I'm going to get you over on our side is what I'm going to do.
Okay. Well, I'm listening. I'm the only one here who's admitted I could be wrong. So I'm willing to listen to what you have to say, Andrew. And I do appreciate you.
Well, I'm right. I'm right, though. I'm not admitting I could be wrong. I'm right.
And I appreciate Andrew, I do want to say thank you again for joining us on my show the other day for the debate. I'd love to have Jim Bob and Chad.
Sure.
Love to have you guys.
Yeah, and anytime you want somebody to come in, there's not too many topics I'm not happy to dive into from the principal conservative side. So I know that was a bit of a contentious debate, but that's what I'm there to do, is represent a worldview. So.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I don't mind being ganged up on because I enjoy it. So thank you, Jim Bob.
Yeah,
Chad,
no problem, dude.
Andrew, have a good evening. Hope to talk to you guys again real soon. You have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Austin.
Peace.
Appreciate you. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Andrew, coming in and doing the translation for the Suds. Always helpful.
Well, I have to I have to translate it for myself because I was sued. I always have to get out the crayon, and I'm like, this is, I'm connecting the dots for myself. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck does this word mean?
No, it does help filtering it down to the least bit of syllables, though. I mean, in the end, it is force wins, so that, you know, an entailment is non-aggression. Aggression is assumed, but then like the whole like deontology, the duties aspect is a killer for libertarians. They don't know what to do with it, because you assume rights. Let's say I granted them, which I don't concede they exist. You still only have duties anyway, and force, like Andrew said. But then you have if force wins, then all you have is what ethical system is informing when you're using force and not. And if it's not the Christian system, what the hell is it?
So would you say, made by Jim Bob, that libertarians tend to be more utilitarian?
Yeah.
As opposed to deontological?
What else can they be?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what else they could be.
Yeah, I mean, I never really got the whole libertarianism thing. I mean, even with their conventions, it seems like a big joke. Like nobody agrees on anything. Everybody's just kind of at each other's throat, and it doesn't really seem to me to be a viable third party. I mean, I'm against a two-party state, but you know, all the other parties are really a joke.
One-party state.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is a one-party state. You're right about that. It is a big uniparty.
Yeah, one-party state. So, and it's not going to change in your or my lifetime ever. So,
right,
you know, there's no, but it's because there's no viable alternative system to force. And so these guys have monopolized force application. The right wing has taken over the religious arm, and the left wing has taken over the institutional arm. So they both have a huge force applicator.
Yeah, man, I need to get back on with Jay, because I did have a question for him. He brought up a very interesting point about Yuri Bezmenov, and specifically the fact that he was or may have been working in cahoots with the CIA. But it's my understanding that he actually tried to alert the CIA about ideological subversion, and they just kind of rejected him. I mean, is that a myth? Do you guys know? Or
well, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Jay. He can speak on behalf of himself. So I don't know what the mythos is around that, and anything that I say could misrepresent him. So that'd be a better, better question.
Well, I guess speaking more like objectively, you know what I'm saying? Like, do you guys know whether it's true that he being Yuri tried to inform the CIA about information that he had about ideological subversion and was rejected by the CIA?
Even if I did know, I wouldn't fucking tell you, right?
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that friendship 101? Isn't that how that's supposed to work? It's like, even if I didn't know, I'm not fucking telling you shit, right?
Jimmy says you can see it in his interviews. Yeah, I mean, Austin, I don't think his overall assessment or critique of that was totally valid, but the concern is valid. Like, if you get someone who's a defector and a liar and like whatever else, a spy, it is reasonable to just be like, okay, well, if he could do that, he could do it again in some sort of double fold. But then you're just left in the sort of like no knowledge of anything. Like, I think you do grant a little bit of charity to people who turn on something that you presume to be bad in order to tell you the truth about these things, right? And it seems to be what he's describing in those videos is not only did happen, but is still happening, and it's very aggressive too. Like, we couldn't deny that that's happening.
So Chad, it's nice to meet you. I don't think I've seen you around on this corner of the internet anytime recently.
This is way dark side.
Yeah. So what's your background? What's your deal, man?
My background, my deal. Well, my background. So what do you mean by my background?
I'm just asking, like, yeah, you know, when you stream.
Like, what country are you from?
Yeah, what's the kind of shit you're talking about when you're streaming? That's what I'm asking.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
What kind of stuff do you stream about, bro?
Well,
that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I talk a lot about like social justice movements over the course of the 20th century, and how all of these things were not what people make them out to be. They were really just operations to, in a sense, I guess to put it lightly, to take advantage of the sensations and the desires of the people to, in a sense, vest the government with all the more power on this kind of quest toward globalism.
Like feminism?
Yeah, feminism, the civil rights movement, like the whole nine. So spent a lot of time talking about that and researching that as well. So
yeah, a lot of communists involved in all of that, huh?
Oh, for sure. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the recent Cat Williams interview, I think that's indicative of part of what
he's a fiery little bastard, isn't he?
He is, but
yeah, I told that motherfucker. I told that motherfucker, you're always gonna be second rate, motherfucker.
But I mean, I guess to the point that Jay was making about Yuri Bezmenov, I see the same thing with Cat Williams. I mean, this interview went viral beyond belief, and I'm listening to Cat Williams talk. And of course, he's saying things that we already know to be true, that Hollywood is demonic and wicked, and these celebrities are plants and this, that, and the third. It's not exactly news. I guess it's news to the extent that here you have a celebrity, someone who is, I guess, Hollywood saying the things. But then I listen to, or I begin to wonder about what's the motive? Like, okay, what is your motive for saying what you're saying? If he were saying, look, normies, look, masses, stop praising and worshiping celebrities, like it's not going to do you any good. If that was his motive, I would think that, okay, he's pure in what he's doing. But his motive seemed to me to be that of a disgruntled man who's jealous of some of these celebrities. And so
Can I give you a different take?
Well, let me.
Yeah, sure. After you
really
done,
quickly.
After done.
So for me, like it kind of came off as though he was just acting disgruntled because, and the reason I say that is he's saying things like, I read 3,000 books a year. These were nonfiction books. I wasn't interested in fiction books. That's 8 books a day. So we know that's not true. He says that he ran away from home with his Rottweiler puppy. And he's basically trying to present himself as this intelligent person who is smarter than the average man. And he's also saying things like, I have more comedy specials than anyone dead or alive. He's very much making much of himself. And then he proceeds to talk about the other celebrities. He's not funny. He's a plant. He wore a dress, this, that, and a third. And so it's almost as if he's upset that they are getting more clout than him in this area or that. And it seems to me like it was just kind of a way I can get back at these people. That doesn't mean that some of the things that he was saying about these celebrities isn't true. It just makes you wonder, like, okay, what's the whole motive or point behind what it is you're saying, if that makes sense. So
yeah. I mean, I had a slightly different takeaway. So my takeaway is, if you know a person for long enough, when they hit their 50s, especially if they're grinders, they've worked their asses off their whole life, right? They move into this bizarre mode called I don't give a fuck mode, right? So here's how I don't give a fuck mode works. It's where you really just stop giving a shit about it. You don't care what people think anymore. You don't care about what the outcomes are going to be. You have plenty of money in the bank. You already have the biggest lawnmower. You already have the nice car in the garage, right? You're already married. You're already settled. You already have all that. And you just stop caring. What that looked like to me was an I don't give a fuck rant, where, you know what I mean? I just stopped giving a shit. So, yeah, some of it looked like maybe he was a little bit jealous of some of these guys, but some of it also looked like he was just kind of saying, this is all fucking bullshit. Most of what you're seeing is bullshit, right? The way people are treated is bullshit. Most of the stories you're hearing are bullshit, and stop believing any of this bullshit. That's more what it looked like to me.
Well, I frankly don't care. I really don't care what's going on with a celebrity. Like I couldn't care less. But it's just interesting to me to see how other people are responding to the interview. And he tells all, Cat Williams tells all. And it's like, at the end of the day, what does it really matter? I don't have a TV in my house. My kids don't watch TV. They're all homeschooled. It's like, but that was it affects our life.
But that when you're looking at that, when you're kind of looking at it through this prism, you do kind of have to care a little bit, because the messaging, which comes out, a lot of messaging comes out of Hollywood. And they do set kind of a precedent. I mean, the old saying was, so goes California, so goes the rest of the country, right? This just means that California is always a playground for policy. If there's some weird, bizarre, fucked up policy that people, that these kind of globalists, as you term them, want to be adopted in the rest of the United States, it's already going to be in California for years, probably in some small municipality long before it ever moves out. It's like a testing ground, right? So I don't know. I think that paying attention to that stuff's probably good. I don't pay attention to too much pop culture because they just annoy the shit out of me. But I do understand why people are interested in it. And the stuff you're talking about is just all clickbait, right? You know, he reveals all. He's going to tell everybody what's up. This is the end of blah, blah, blah. You know, all that shit. It's all sensationalism and clickbait, right?
For sure.
So anyway.
Well, that brought up a point early on. I was asking, well, are these fancy people losing their pull and sway? And I agree with Andrew that they never really do lose it if it's looked at as a giant monster called Hollywood and mainstream media. But individuals, the fame aspect is, I think it's losing its oomph. I think they need to do different strategies, and I don't know what those are. Chad, you spoke and you said, well, they're getting more nuanced with how they do this stuff, messaging, co-opting spokespeople to say certain narratives for whatever. Now it's at the fucking war level, which it's always been, I guess. But
well, and also, Chad, it does look goofy to smoke a pipe while you have the earpiece in. It just looks out of place. I'm just letting you know. It just looks out of place to have the nice pipe. You know what I mean? I can tell it's aromatic tobacco that you got in there, right? Nice aromatic tobacco, probably something that smells vanilla-ish, I'm guessing, right? But you got the fucking earpiece, right? You got the earpiece. It just looks out of place.
Yeah, put giant headphones instead. Chad, you also have really a lot of info on MLK, and that story has really, I don't think that's really broken too much to the mainstream, especially the right side of things. The classical liberals, called the conservative movement for the most part, they also love MLK Jr. They think he was like, well, this is real. This is the real classical liberalism, and I bet you get some flack, no, for some of the work you do.
Well, so we did a film called Uncle Tom 2. We released it in 2022, and in the film we explore the way in which communism, globalism has disseminated around the world, and how it's made its way to the United States over the course of the 20th century, and how Black activism was a kind of catalyst for this happening here in this country.
Through
and how Martin Luther
justice,
King,
yeah.
right, through social justice, how Martin Luther King was very much a part of that. He's not isolated from it. And a lot of your Republicans like to think that he is a good guy. I can't tell you how many comments I get, or, you know, how many comments I get from Republicans say, oh, Martin Luther King was a Republican, or if he were allowed today, he'd be a Republican. And to me, it's like, okay, first of all, I don't care whether he's a Republican or a Democrat, because these words don't actually mean anything. But first of all, he wasn't. I mean, he worked pretty closely with LBJ to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was hugely unconstitutional. Not to mention the fact that you already had advances and strides being made in terms of race relations between Black and white on the ground level without the NAACP, without any kind of agitative forces or anything of that nature, without the government. You had a kind of gradual coming together through the free market. This is a thing that was happening. And so when you look at Martin Luther King, one of the other, I guess, narratives that we hear is that, well, he didn't become socialist or Marxist till later in his life. That's actually not true as well. He was always a Marxist, dating as far back to the age of 15.
All of them
and
were.
So
all those big high profile figures were Marxist. Even Muhammad Ali was a Marxist.
Yeah.
All of them were Marxist.
Mhm.
Malcolm X was
Gandhi.
a Marxist. They were all Marxists. And the thing is that just like the modern BLM is headed by Marxists and was headed by Marxists, that's always been an entry point. They always use the Black population as an entry point because of social justice. That's a way to get a lot of cameras on you. It's a way to get a lot of people looking at something. And that's when you start kind of pushing through what is the egalitarian Marxist manifesto, right?
100%, 100%. And so we released the film in 2022, and we were sounding the alarm. We understood that when we released the film that your average person isn't ready for this information. Most people are going to dismiss it because of how enshrined MLK is. I mean, he has a 20-foot statue in Washington, D.C. We have a holiday that commemorates him that was passed into law by a Republican president.
Yeah, it's fantastic propaganda.
Exactly. Exactly. So
fantastic propaganda.
Exactly. So regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, everybody worships Martin Luther King. So he is a sacred cow for all intents and purposes. Whenever we released the film, there were some buzzing here and there, but no one of any kind of, prominent clout or anything was saying it.
Like Kanye. Kanye really could have done something, right?
So recently, within the past month or so, Charlie Kirk came out and he's echoing some of the things that we said, and I'm like, okay. I'm not a huge fan of Charlie Kirk, but I think
the rest of the Con Inc. Looney Tunes who absolutely demand that we have big tent republicanism and we allow in all of the gays because why not get rid of the grounding foundation and principles of what it is that we're after, right? That would be insane.
Right.
Where can we find the documentary? Okay.
It's on Amazon Prime. Okay. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's also on UncleTom.com. Is it easy to remember? UncleTom.com. But I mean, you're right.
What an amazing troll that is.
How did you grab it? How much did that cost?
I think we played a pretty penny for it. But
I mean, I guess that's somebody's life savings when into UncleTom.com. But
sorry, son.
You're always going to be able to get your money back on that URL, okay? UncleTom.com.
Definitely.
But I mean, he was an absolute Marxist. There is no question about it. But what's interesting is I've had a lot of older Black prominent Republicans basically reach out to me privately. Chad, what are you doing? We're going to lose the kind of growing Black Republican number and this, that, and the third. It's like
there is no growing Black Republican number. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's the only monolithic voting mechanism in the United States you can always count on. It is, I mean, the only monolith. There is no other monolith like that. Which, I mean, there you can sway it a little bit, in these other blocks. I mean, what happens there is in the monolithic voting, it's barely swayed at all. Yeah. And I've got a feeling it's going to just increase. Even the kind of break you saw, slight break towards republicanism in these elections, and man, it was slight. I don't even think that'll stay.
What I don't understand, maybe you guys can help me out, is you have a lot of Republicans, which I'm not a Republican, but you have a lot of conservatives and Republicans who tout people like Martin Luther King and even FDR. I've seen Republicans tout FDR and his Social Security and these things. Mm-hmm. They tout these things as good things, while at the same time trying to assert their conservative ideals or insist upon their conservative ideals. How is that not counterproductive? How, on the one hand, are you touting somebody who is a known Marxist while at the same time trying to convince people that conservatism is a way to go? It's like, to me, this is one of the reasons why the modern conservative movement is so cringe. It's so backwards. It's so unproductive. And it's pretty much a joke.
Well, I can tell you why that happens. It's because, do you know, in Orthodox Christianity, communism is anathematized. So in other words, you can't be an Orthodox Christian and a communist. It's not allowed. You would be excommunicated from the church. The reason that you see this thing happening, where you see Republicans pushing an ideology which seems to be counterproductive, is because most of them are secularists. And so they have no foundation from which to ground any of the things that they're saying. So it's easy for them to pivot conservative ideals over into secular values, because what else are they going to pivot them into? They consider Christianity to be extremism. That's considered to be extremism in party politics now. And that was never the case. So it's expected that you say, I'm a Christian. That's fine. But if you say I'm a Christian and that informs the way I'm going to govern, now you're a fucking extremist, right? So it's literally that. I mean, it's that simple. And so that's why you see these entry points, these subversion points come in, because there's no foundation. So none of these people will say, I'm going to rule from the values which I'm telling you I have. Instead, they say, I have these values, but I'm going to rule from a secular angle so that I can appeal to the most amount of people. And that's why it's so easy for them to be subverted.
Is it timidity or what?
It's not. Well, it's worse than timidity. It's actually become a social taboo to make a political claim that you're going to rule in any other way than in a secular way, because somehow in the language, secularism has been conflated with fair-handedness. If you're ruling as a Christian, you're going to be unfair. You're going to be biased. You're going to be ostracizing a certain portion of the population. As a secularist, you won't do that. We're the only ones who can be fair.
It's called the myth of neutrality. It's the myth of religious neutrality.
Yeah. And but the truth is the opposite happens. It turns out that when Christians are in charge, because their doctrine itself has it's a doctrine which pushes towards some kind of fairness and some kind of actual justice, which is what fairness, I think, really is justice. Yeah. That's why, though, is because people can, the expectation is you can say you're a Christian, that appeals to the voting bloc, but you can't say I'm going to rule from the prism of being a Christian. That's when you are moved into the extremist category. Yeah. Well, imagine if Joe Biden came out and he said, I've been a lifelong Catholic, and when I run this country, I'm going to run it under a Catholic dogmatic values. That would not have worked, right? At all. So he's saying the things that inform my morality and my ethics, I'm going to reject for your secular ethics. And that's why it's so perverse. It makes no sense, right? Imagine you saying, these are my values, but I'm going to reject them as soon as I'm in charge.
Yeah. This is the other part, Andrew, that you're adding to that the Christians you see, the progressive Christians, are now growing, but they are kind of cannibalizing in the same way. Dan says for $4.99, come on, fellas, a good Christian is nice and accepts everyone. What would Jesus do? Yeah, that's the shield, isn't it? Like they use Christ as a shield, and then they say, well, if Christ-like means putting up a rainbow flag and letting everyone in and being like, yo, you could be the pastor, you could be the preacher, you could be the priest. This is total talk about subversion. I mean, the church itself, the attempt to subvert Christianity is, at least in some respects, is maybe fully complete, but it's not gonna, that side of things luckily isn't gonna last, though, because they have no foundations, so they just change with the trends. If you change with the trends, you saw what happened with the Troons and stuff. They eat each other because last week is no longer popular this week, so you're like, all right, okay, just watch them, watch it.
And this is why the whole conversation between Austin and Jay was so fascinating to me. Because it was very difficult to kind of track down what Austin's principles were. Like, what are your principles? What is your basis? What is your foundation? And I'm not trying to talk crap about him behind his back, but it was very difficult to like understand, okay, where are you coming from? And this is like, to me, I think that's the epitome of libertarianism.
I don't even get mad, I don't even get mad about that, though, because the truth is that most people don't ever think about that, including most people who are in charge of your life. Right. Most people who are in charge of your life, and most people who operate in life, they never think about any of the reasons that they even do the things that they do. They don't even think about it. So it's from my perspective, it's like the guy is maybe normal enough that you can move him off that position. Right. And the leftist scum aren't. They're not even normal enough that you can move them off their leftist scumbag positions. But a guy like that, I feel like, you can just kind of slowly over time, once you point out, isn't this fucking stupid? And he goes, well, yeah. Well, then stop doing that shit and come over here. Right. That's the ultimate goal, isn't it?
Well, my basis is that I am a Christian. I'm a Bible believing Orthodox fundamentalist Christian. And, one of the verses.
Well, hang on. Can you back up?
Yeah.
Orthodox fundamentalist. What do you mean by that?
So I believe in the inerrancy of the scriptures.
So you're not an Orthodox Christian.
I'm a
Like
very
the church.
well. No, I'm not. I don't belong to the Orthodox Church. No, I don't.
Okay,
I'm just saying.
Or you could say maybe a way to frame it would be you're not related in any way to Catholicism, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm very
got it. So when you say
Protestant.
Orthodox, you just mean traditional.
Traditional. Yeah.
Okay. So you have a traditional fundamental belief.
Correct.
Okay.
So, one of the verses in the Bible is to not be taken captive by hollow and deceptive philosophies. And so whenever Austin says, are you open to the idea that you can be wrong? Like, no, I'm not open to that idea because I believe.
Why would we do that? Yeah, why would we do that?
Right.
Why would we do that?
Right.
If we thought we were right and we thought God is the foundational starting point for all truth and knowledge, if that were true and we believed it, how could it not, what else, give me an alternative. Well, his alternative, was, no, your brain produces molecules, right? Things that's called truth. I just, the question itself followed by the alternative is brutal to listen to. I have to attack it.
Do you follow the solas, Chad?
The solas.
Sola Scriptura, Sola Fide, the Bible alone, faith alone, things like that.
Oh, yeah. But I just wanted to make a quick point before we get onto that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, Andrew, about to the extent that you allow your Christian faith to inform your political involvement or engagement. I totally agree with that. I am super extremist in my views as it relates to politics. For one, I don't believe in the suffrage of everyone. I don't believe that we should just give everybody the right to vote. I just don't.
That's because it's stupid.
I do believe that there should be
It's stupid. Why do I want an 18-year-old girl to invalidate my vote? That's stupid.
Exactly. I do believe that it should
They're stupid. I don't want them to vote. Right? Anyway, go ahead.
I believe that there should be a litmus test too. I believe in litmus tests. I don't believe that you should just, even if you own property and you're a man, I still believe you should pass a litmus test that questions your knowledge of the way our Constitution and our 3-tier government works. I think you should understand that at the very least. So yeah, I believe that education should be decentralized. I believe, again, so I think that you can't have my views and be run for office or be considered.
You'd be stigmatized immediately,
right?
As they would call you a black
bigot.
Nazi,
black bigot.
No, they would literally say that this is what the future of white nationalism looks like, and then they put his face there. That's what you think I'm joking. Okay,
No,
I've seen this time and time again. That's what they would say. They'd say this guy was put up as a front for some white nationalist organization because one time he shook some dude's hand, right? Some dude walked over and he's like, hey, Chad, it's nice to meet you. He shakes. He doesn't even know who the fuck he is, right? And it turns out he's some Fed plant white nationalist leader. So there's the link, and then
wait. You mean like being on a show with Andrew Wilson?
But anyway, so they'd be like, there's the link. You're done forevermore. And then they'd be like, now we know that there's this nefarious link which exists. Here's these people shaking hands on the front page of everything. You know what I mean? And then suddenly it'd be like the future of white nationalism looks more colorful than you thought. That's what it would literally be. I'm not kidding. That's the way they do that shit. Am I wrong, Chad?
No, you're not wrong at all.
Nazi of color. Hey, Nazi of color. That's going to be the thing. Oh, he's a Nazi of color.
Yeah, he's like it's like the 1980s interracial gang meme. You know what I mean? the 1980s interracial gangs that didn't exist, and it's like that's what they would do, and that they would do it only because they wouldn't do it if you had extreme rhetoric. That wouldn't do it. It's only if you had extreme rhetoric and you said, and by the way, I have foundational biblical principles and faith in Jesus Christ as the Lord and Savior, and that's how I'm going to rule when I'm in charge. That's the greatest existential threat to the establishment that exists.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, no one can do that, right? But is that breaking down, or they're gonna they're gonna do a tight stranglehold on that. Eventually, does that break through, and does it start at the local level where people can start doing that?
The local politics is fine. Even state level,
Okay.
you can do that. You can't do it on the national stage. You can't be a person running for Congress, running for the Senate, the national level, and get away with any of that. State, you can join state bodies, state government. There's all kinds of fucking lunatics on state bodies all over the United States. I mean, actual lunatics, like crazy people who have crazy puffs of hair, and they just say psychobabble because locals think that shit's funny, right? They vote him into office because he goes out and makes crazy speeches, and they're like, "Oh, look, Bill's at it again." You know what I mean? It's like localized entertainment. So yeah, you could do that at the local level, but yeah, at the national level, there's no way. You have to tone it all down. That's why you always see these guys they start as these based, awesome Christians, and then they start running in the national stage, and they're like, my policies on homosexuality are live and let live. And I think that it's just swell to have rainbows on the White House occasionally just to show our solidarity with our friends in the, you know what I mean? That kind of shit. When what they should be saying, they would be like, oh my God, that shit's disgusting. He needs to get the fuck out of here immediately. What the, you know what I mean? That's the kind of rhetoric that would win. That would win. But do you
really think it would win though?
It would win as long if the smear machine wasn't in full order where they could do this. Even with the smears, you would still win, except what they would do is they would give you a blackout. They'd give you a media blackout. Donald Trump, the one anomaly which has happened, maybe in all of U.S. history, this is maybe there's parallels I'm not aware of, but
are you referring to 2016 Trump or 2020 Trump?
Yeah, 2016 Trump. One of the great anomalies was that the media thought that he was like a lolcow they were milking, right? They just thought he was like a court jester that they were milking to make Republicans look bad. They didn't realize that by all of that media coverage, even though it was all negative, that got his message out to this massive audience, which, brought him in to listen to it. But he was an anomaly, an exception to the rule. What they would normally do in the circumstance where you had somebody who's super articulate and was able to kind of put the issues at the forefront, kick the hell out of all their opponents in a debate, and use this kind of foundational ethical system, is they would give them an instant media blackout. No attention. And that's the killer. It's not even that they would have to run all the smears. They would just literally black them out. Period. No attention.
Yeah, I agree. I think Trump was a glimpse of exactly what you're talking about in terms of the bombastic candidate who just goes in and just says what's on his mind. But I agree with you. Like at the local level, kind of like what I was saying at the beginning of the stream. As someone who is dead against socialism, for example, I don't think that socialism is a viable form of government. It goes against human nature. There's nothing good about it. However, constitutionally speaking, you can technically have a socialist government at the local level. If a given people of a given kind of region within a township or what have you wish to, vote in some young,
you can have a commune.
Right.
Just a commune. You can look at, there's religious communes. They work just fine. But everybody has to be under a singular ideology for that to work. And they have to have some kind of principle that
you go on a voluntary basis. And
if you look at communes actually with no religious foundation, they don't work, right? They fall apart fairly quickly because different people come in with different ideas. And one day is like, I grow a lot of fucking tomatoes and I'm going to charge you a little bit more money. And they're like, you can't do that, Bob. We're in a commune. And so suddenly the thing starts to fall apart. In a religious based foundational community, you don't have those problems because they're working towards a greater ideology. So, but I don't even consider that communism or socialism. No, it's actually the opposite. They're abstaining and depriving themselves on purpose for a greater value of trying to commune better with God, which makes sense. What doesn't make sense is going, we're just going to be hippies and have this big sex cult in the middle of fucking nowhere and grow tomatoes, right? That's like that's not a workable option from my point of view.
Yeah. I wanted to bring this up with Austin too. The Andrew, you said, well, no, they have to be united under an ideology for it to work. even if it doesn't work, it has to start with that. And pluralism, like Austin's view, like, and a lot of libertarians is like, that's the beauty of America. It's all these different views coming. It's like diversity.
This guy
is our
says
strength.
cum commune. a commune.
Yeah, commune.
It's
Yeah.
communism.
Yeah, communism. That's yeah. So that the pluralism. I didn't even get to it with him, but that's a defeater too to whatever standard he's going to try to bring. It's like, well, no, the threads can't tie together because they're not united under an ideology. There's no cohesion. What's the cohesion? Rights. That's just not enough. It's just not enough. Any other questions, Andrew, you had for Chad or
no, it was really nice to meet you. It was kind of, refreshing to not talk to a complete dipshit. So that was kind of nice. That doesn't happen very often to me. So, but occasionally there's like a diamond in the rough where I'm like, wow, this guy's not fucking stupid. This is great.
Yep.
Somebody said Chad's a simp. I wonder what they mean by that.
He's simping for who?
I'm not offended, but I'm just.
Well, I mean, you did make UncleTom.com, Chad. I mean, right?
Just an
I mean,
investment.
I love trolling the right and the left as it relates to Martin Luther King. I mean, Martin Luther King was a compulsive adulterer. He was a drug addict. He was an atheist. He was a communist. All the things.
You never beat a hooker in the back of your hotel room even once, Chad. Not even once.
What are you, some kind of Puritan?
Yeah. Well, I mean, come on, Chad. Like, isn't it a kind of a rite of passage a little bit? You just kind of, back room, your politics smacks back, right? Isn't that
I can honestly say I've never done that.
You never done, whatever. That's
you don't
why
remember.
You had to make, that's why you had to make UncleTom.com, Chad. You couldn't get with the program.
So, Chad, are you even at this point? You have a pretty big following on YouTube and Instagram. You are still invited to some more mainstream, conversations. Talking.
I mean, I don't get invited to stuff anymore. Like, I will say,
it's the best, Chad.
I will say that I am flying out tomorrow. Dr. Carol Swain, she's having an event in Tennessee, and people like Larry Elder is going to be there. Dr. James Lindsay is going to be there. There's going to be, and I'm actually going to be sitting on a panel with Dr. James Lindsay. And I was kind of surprised that Dr. Carol Swain invited me to this event, because she's one of the people who called me and was upset that I'm going in on Martin Luther King. What good does it do? We're supposed to be bringing people together. It's about unity. It's like, well, no, the guy was a fraud. He was a fraud. You're worshiping a fraud. And that's where I stand. And so the fact that she invited me to this thing, and the name of the conference is The American Dream, and there's a big picture of Martin Luther King. I was like, are you sure you want to invite me to this thing? So she invited me, and I'm going to show up and basically tell the truth.
Well, Chad, can I
I'm not going
to
be a dick about it, but at the same time, it's like,
maybe you should be a little bit of a dick about it.
Yeah,
just
a little aggressive.
Not
especially.
much, you know what I mean? But like maybe lose the vest and then just really deliver it, you know what I mean? But I got to ask you, though, you've met Larry Elder?
Yeah, he's the executive producer of our film.
Does he have a sense of humor?
He does.
Like, I mean, really?
Yeah, I mean, talking to Larry one-on-one, like he does have a sense of humor. He's not robotic.
Okay, because I was confused. Yeah. Look, I've watched Larry Elder for years. Okay, years since I was a little
Are you
kid.
in California?
No, I mean I grew up.
You kind of have a Californian accent.
Well, I grew up in California. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Grew up in California.
That's the one thing we have on him.
It's one. That's right. It's the one thing. But anyway, years, because I think he used to go in and he would cover for Limbaugh or one of the talk show hosts. I don't remember who it was. Right, it was one of the popular ones he would cover. And I always liked listening to his points because he was a real smart guy. But I was always like, does this guy ever fucking laugh? Does this guy ever crack a smile, tell a joke, anything?
Are you talking about Larry Elder, or are you talking about Clarence Thomas?
No, Larry Elder.
Not all black people look alike,
You know, that was a really low blow from a guy wearing a vest with no tie. I got to tell you, you know.
I actually took the tie off before I came on. But,
he took the tie off. Like that makes that make it better.
Have you engaged with James Lindsay? I can't quite get him to respond
No, I haven't.
anything.
All right. I've never met James. I mean, I'm going to be sitting on a panel with him on Saturday morning, and the discussion that we're going to be having is how has cultural Marxism disseminated in America. So that should be an interesting conversation.
Okay. So he'll be safe. He'll be safe from being ridiculed from his classical liberal approach that he runs from every debate. Sorry, says I'm a little sour. I want him to engage with his opposition, but he doesn't. But
is he? So I heard that he's atheist and homosexual. Is that true?
I think one of those is obvious.
Who?
James Lindsay.
Oh, come
you know James Lindsay.
Come on. I mean, yeah. No. Come on. What do you? Of course.
Actually, no. That was a serious question.
I'm joking.
No, that was a serious question because I don't know who James Lindsay is. Like I've never heard him opine on anything, so I don't know what his whole.
I mean, it sounds like you've got a good understanding going in, bro.
Yeah. Well, somebody texted that to me, so I just
well, if you stay on Marxism, he'll be fine. But maybe eventually you can engage with his position and show him the ropes with that, like the problems. Basically, what happened tonight. Like,
he's married. Robert says he's been married for years. So yeah, I'm just teasing, right? So if you see James Lindsay, be like, the guy was kidding. He was kidding. You know, he was joking.
Somebody said he's an anti-communist. The word anti-communist or term anti-communist is very interesting to me because part of the diversive tactics or agitative tactics throughout the 20th century is for communists or fellow travelers to call themselves anti-communists.
This guy says, he's married to a dude?
I don't think so.
So messed up, dude. Stop, you fuckers. This chat's gone wild, Jim Bob. There's no control here at all.
I let him go. I don't even care.
There's no fucking control here.
Don't even care.
He says he's an atheist, but he's friendly to Christians. Okay. Yeah, I don't care, but I was just asking.
You care,
Chad?
Come on,
Chad.
Chad.
What's your take
you
on?
Care, Chad. You care.
Chad.
I don't. Well. Here's what I mean when I say I don't care. I don't care. Like if somebody is gay or atheist, like I'll still have a conversation with them. I'm not going to let that frighten me from engaging in a conversation.
Yeah, sure.
But I do care. I mean, yes, homosexuals will not inherit the kingdom of God. It says it right there. So. And you know what else? You know what else, Chad? They're fucking gross. Can like, how come nobody ever acknowledges this other kind of truth?
Just that part.
Just the part where, like, that shit's fucking gross. I never hear anybody say, "Hey, and you know what else? Gross." That would be. I wish that was like a national qualifier. Or someone's like, "Hi, my name's Tom, and I'm gay," and you're like, "Fucking gross," right? Like that would just be great.
Yeah, you can't help what you find gross, so you're.
It's not my fault.
Yeah,
it's part of my epistemology.
I was born this. I was born this way.
I was born this way.
No, it is objectively gross, though. That is a fact.
Yeah,
that's an objective.
Chad, have you looked into, just like I'm sure people have asked you, well, are you a supporter of Christian populism or nationalism? That seems to be a buzzword that's gonna not go away. But do you ever debate that? Do you ever affirm that? What's your take on that?
On Christian nationalism?
Yeah, whatever that means to you, basically.
He's about to say the words. Well, I know what's going on right now. In his mind, he's going, I got to be really careful how I phrase this. I want to say 100%, yes, I'm on board. But it's been so associated with white nationalism, which I'm against, and most people are because it's insanity. And he's trying to parse this out. So, Chad, can I take a shot at it, right? Christian nationalism, if it's just a synergistic relationship between the church and the state, you're for that, right?
No.
No?
When I think of nationalism, and part of my ignorance, But nationalism to me is akin to some degree of socialism, is it not?
No.
Okay, white nationalism, like I've heard white nationalists talk quite extensively, and they say a lot of the same things as your Marxists do.
What does that have
in
to do
terms
with
of what they believe?
nationalism?
Well, I'm just saying, like all forms of nationalism, black nationalism,
Hang
white
on,
nationalism.
back up.
Well, hold on. Let me
hang on.
just,
Before you give the qualifier, why did you start with white nationalists say X
let
when we're
me
talking
give
about
you-
nationalism?
Let me give you a basis of what I think nationalism is, and you can correct me because
Okay.
I don't claim to know what it is.
All right.
But what I've observed to be true as it relates to black nationalism, white nationalism, all the different forms of nationalism, is they kind of share in the same basic framework of what it is they believe, being anti quote unquote capitalist, and like they have a lot of the same kind of sensations and desires and things of this nature. It's just a matter of they want at the forefront their preferred identity, whatever that identity is, be it white or black or whatever the case may be. So is that
That's,
like
that's
a retarded definition of what nationalism
totally
is?
So what you're talking about there is ethno-nationalism.
Mhm.
Ethno-nationalism has nothing to do with civic nationalism. Civic national has nothing to do with cultural nationalism, other than they have nationalism in their name. So it's like national socialism has nothing to do with cultural nationalism. It's not the same thing at all. So if you're talking about nationalism, let me just ask you, if there was a tribe which was on a continent that was really, really big, would that be a nation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then what's wrong with that?
No, I'm not. So my whole thing is, I think when it comes to Christian nationalism and the debate around it, a question that I often see coming up is, can you legislate morality? That's one of the questions that come up whenever Christian nationalism is being debated and discussed. I believe you can, and I believe that you should legislate morality.
Isn't that what all legislation is?
Right. Well, but do you think that the question is properly framed?
Yeah, I don't see any. Not only do I not see a problem with the question, but I like the answer. So the question is, do you think you can legislate morality? And you say, yeah, fucker, I do think I can legislate morality, and I'm going to do it. Right? I not only do I see zero problem with that, but doesn't that make sense? Doesn't that just follow? Aren't we always legislating morality?
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, if we were to put what I believe into words and definitions, not to sound like a postmodernist, but I guess you can call me a Christian nationalist, because if I were elected into office, my Christian faith will definitely inform literally everything I do in office, how I vote on bills, what bills I introduced, what departments I want to sunset, and things of this nature. So it will literally dictate everything that I do. So if that's a Christian nationalist, I guess that's what I am.
Well, let's take it a step further.
I will say,
what if Christian nationalists were to get elected in mass, let's say 60 years, okay, and they wanted to make legislation that you couldn't hold office if you were a secularist ever? Would you support that legislation? Man, now remember, we're legislating morality here, Chad.
Yeah. Well, so when I asked, not to answer your question with a question, but when I asked, is that the right question to ask? I'm wondering if a better question, instead of saying, can you legislate morality, wouldn't a better question be, and you can tell me if it's not, I'm completely open to this. Should legislation have a moral basis? Would that be the better question to ask?
Well, no, not necessarily.
Okay.
So not all legislation is going to be specifically about a moral question. You can legislate on neutral things. So for instance, I don't think it's a moral question whether or not you should stand in line, right? But you can make legislation.
So you're talking about malin se versus malin prohibita, correct?
Okay. What if I say you have to stand in a line?
Well, that's tyranny.
No, that's not tyranny. If I tell you have to stand in a line based on whatever this activity is that you want to move towards doing, you have to be in a line in order to do it. That's not tyranny. What's
No, there's not.
tyrannical about that? It doesn't seem tyrannical to me. It seems like it's just organization, right? So the question becomes, there can be neutral things which come up. So like, let me give you an example of a neutral. That's something you would call that's maybe easier. You ever been in a four-way stop?
Yeah.
Okay, I would say that having stoplights there, probably we could say is like a moral. There's probably some moral prerogative there to make sure that people don't smack each other with their automobiles and like kill each other, right? That's probably, we would probably agree that there's some, maybe we can introduce morality into this question of why we're legislating you have to have the stoplights there. But we can also have a roundabout there, right? We can have the stoplights or we can have the roundabout. We're basically trying to accomplish, but we're basically trying to accomplish the same thing, right? But if you go to my town and I have a four-way stop with 4 stoplights and you have a roundabout in yours, you wouldn't go over and say, well, that's immoral, right? That seems kind of stupid, right? But I'm definitely forcing you to stop, and I'm definitely forcing you to do a thing against your will, maybe, at least potentially. And I'm inhibiting your ability to travel freely how you want to. So there can be neutral questions that come up with legislation, I guess is what I'm saying.
So the question of should legislation have a moral basis is an all-encompassing question, whereas asking, can you legislate morality?
Well, they're two different. I mean, you're actually in two different total categories. So category one, the question is being asked, can we make legislation in regards to morals that people have to adhere to? The answer to this is yes. Okay. Question two is, should all legislation have a moral basis to even make it? And so to that question, I would say no, because that seems silly to me. But to the question of whether or not we should be able to legislate based on morals, yeah, of course.
You're really saying, should we legislate behavior? And it's always the answer is yes. We're always legislating behavior or not behavior, which Andrew pointed out. But then the question is, what informs the legislation of the behavior? And it's always going to, for the most part, it's going to be moral, except for some of the examples Andrew's pointed out. I would even argue, someone might actually argue that there is no ethical neutrality at all, even for things that seems to be superficial. But you don't need to get into it. The point is like,
I just think that conceptually it's easier to say like, if there's a sign that says, walk on the sidewalk, right? And don't walk on the grass, right? I'm not sure that we need to bog ourselves down with the ethical question of whether or not we need to walk on the fucking grass or not, right? I don't think that that's something that we need to interject ethics into necessarily.
Except when the libertarians and the anarchists, they start flailing about and they go, I don't listen to your rules, and that becomes an ethical issue for them at that moment. So your dissenters actually, even though they don't have a basis, they will actually appeal to like, this isn't right. You can't force me to walk on the thing, right? So
and that's why we appeal to all the guys with guns who enforce our laws.
That's right.
That's what institutional power is all about, and that's why you're going to walk on the fucking sidewalk, right? that's what institutional power is about. One of the biggest kind of gots against the conservative establishment as it is that we're all constantly bogged down in this dumbass quagmire with secularists where we don't say the words that need to be said, which is, it's fine for me to rule. And not only is it fine for me to rule, but if I do rule, to enforce the will that I have, which is an extension of why I'm here. I'm elected to be here to rule based on the morals that I'm here to rule with. So I will apply force to apply those morals. That seems totally reasonable to me. And it's exactly what secularists do. So what in the world could they argue?
Are you a proponent of Christian nationalism, Andrew?
I am, yeah.
Okay, so
I would call it Christian populism.
What is a Christian nationalist or Christian populist view on our current constitutional framework? Do they believe it should be revised, or do they think that Christian nationalism or Christian populism can work within the infrastructure of what our Constitution lays out? Like, what's the take on that?
So let me walk you through it. The Constitution as it currently exists, right, really only extends rights to whoever the establishment, as it were, decides to give those rights to. And that's it. And the idea that we have rights to begin with is absurd. You don't have a right to own a gun. That's bullshit. I wish we did, but we don't. And I wish you had the right to free speech, but you don't. And you don't have the right to keep the government via your Third Amendment from making your house in time of war into a military encampment, because they've done that. They've declared martial law during hurricanes, and they've gone in and taken over people's homes, right? And under War Powers Acts have been able to do this. You don't really have a Fifth Amendment right against incrimination. You have FISA courts and people who will collect your electronic data. You have people who will torture you under the right mechanisms for information. You don't have rights. That's all bullshit. And we kind of pretend like it's true, and we try to seize them when we can, when other people respect them. But for the most part, they don't, including our own political establishment. What Christian nationalism is a proponent of doing, and what it's proposing, is that there is a relationship which is synergistic between Christianity and the state. Not that one rules the other, because it doesn't need to, but the state does need to have its morality informed. And since we've tried the experiment of informing the state's morality via some kind of rights, meaning things which are entitlements absent duties, and we see this fail over and over and over and over again, there has to be something that's more foundational than that for people to move towards, other than just my gimmies and my rights and my entitlements. There has to be greater duties. And so there's an actual term for this, but I won't launch into what it is. But just think of it in the terms of a synergistic relationship. In other words, it's okay for Christians to be in charge. It's okay for Christians to rule, and it's okay for Christians to rule based on their moral prism. All of that's okay, and there's no good arguments against it. That's really
Is it as big of a
go ahead.
Is it as big of a pipe dream as libertarianism, or is it more attainable?
Not only is it more attainable, but it's happening. So here's how it's happening. Right now, you have a huge birth rate crisis, which is going on globally. Nobody knows really that this is happening yet, because the media has done everything it can to obfuscate from it. But it's happening. The reproduction rate in the United States is under replacement. And what we do is we pump in mass migrants in order to compensate for the lack of children that are being born. And the problem is we're pumping them in from migrant nations that have the same exact issue. And the population is going to continuously contract and contract and contract until we hit a collapse. But interestingly enough, there's this hidden gem, which is that people who are secularists, they don't reproduce. And people who are religious do, and they do a lot. Yeah. And that gap is growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. And so you're almost actually assured over time, if you make this a cross-generational project, to be able to seize power. But you have to make sure that in the interim time, as you're having your lots and lots of babies and training them up with them good old Christian values, that you're instilling in them that it's okay for them to rule. It's okay for you to have positions of power and rule from that ethical blend. You outnumber we're going to end up outnumbering the secularists by such a wide margin. It's going to be incredible. But we have to do something about their indoctrination machines in the interim time. And that's what the fight is now.
But your notion, in a sense, presupposes that those Christians who are having lots of children adhere to a fundamentalist understanding of the Bible.
Doesn't make a presupposition, because we have great data on this from Pew Research and others. And here's what you read in the data. If you're born and your parents are Christian, you're probably going to be a Christian. If you're born and your parents are Muslims, you're probably going to be a Muslim. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The more religious your parents are, the more religious you tend to be. The less religious they are, the less religious they tend to be. And guess what? The less religious they tend to be and more secular, the less children they end up having. This is why you see Protestantism, which has become the greatest infiltrated institution inside of the West, is beginning its collapse as people move out of Protestantism to secularism, but they're moving towards Catholicism, Orthodoxy, and traditional churches instead. That's where they're finding the solace, because they don't want to go to their local Episcopalian church and see the LGBTQ flag, right? That's like a slap in the face to them. So as you see the collapse of Protestantism, and what you will perceive in the interim, the small interim period, about 30 years, it's going to look like secularism is really climbing. But what's really happening is a transition of power through just birth. If you look at Japan, you see a huge issue happening because their birth rates have collapsed. North Korea is not even going to be there in 200 years. They're at less than 1 is their replacement rate. But in Japan, you don't have enough young people to take care of the old people. We're going to end up in just a few short years, about 30 years, you're going to have more 15-year-olds or less 15-year-olds than you have, 60, 70, and 80-year-olds. Well, this is a big problem because what do you do about elder care and this kind of thing? This is a global crisis that nobody even knows is happening. And you're going to see it. So the future really is ours, right? But you have to begin to move towards the understanding that this is like a great church. It's not going to be built in a single generation. It's going to take multiple generations, but we have the numbers on our side for wise about it. So what I would call this would be Christian futurism or Christian populism. It's not going to be something we can do in our lifetime, but we don't really need to. All we got to do is set the foundations for it. So that's the way I see it.
Good breakdown.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can use it.
My kids aren't public school. Like I wouldn't dream of it. Our kids have never spent a day in public school. They are homeschooled. We teach them the faith. We're quite serious about it, and don't have a TV in our house. I mean, it's not like we are, in a sense, forcing anything down their throats, but it's like they ask lots of good questions. I just took my boys to coffee this morning. They're asking me all kinds of deep philosophical and theological questions, and they're not but 10 and 8. So
yeah. You'll find, right, as they get older, all right, kids become wayward, but they tend to come back. Remember the prodigal son. They tend to come back.
Yeah.
And the thing is that it's okay. Even if they spend most of their life fucking up, it's still okay. If they have those values instilled, they're going to fuck up less than everybody else. Usually that's just the way it is, man. And it's like, if you can continue that process cross-generationally, you're almost assured to win, because secularists basically abort their children. They use mass birth control. They coom, but they do not do reproductive acts. They're just not very into the reproduction. That's like kind of against materialism, right? How can I have my nice life and lots of money and the bling and do the reproductive act without any of the consequences of the reproductive act? That's the materialist coup mindset. And it's like you're basically destined to win if you're wise about the pathway forward.
And they don't have kids, so they need yours. That's why it's so clear now with everything Andrew broke down. It's not just demonic, which it is, to go after the kids. Right. There's that
Imagine
element, but
how stupid this comment is. This guy says Christianity is not a tool to win the culture war. Yes, it is, you dumb bastard. That is the tool to win the culture war, because it's the culture that we want to see. What are you that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's not a tool to be used to win the culture. Yes, it is a tool to be used to win it's the only tool to win the culture war. That's the dumbest thing a human being has ever said. Probably the dumbest chat that I've ever heard in my life was that chat. And man, I've seen some stupid ones, but that was like.
I also want to clarify, Andrew saying that you could utilize Christianity in a certain way that's pragmatic toward a goal does not mean he believes Christianity is just a tool, right? And I think that's a key distinction here. He's not like Jordan Peterson, where it's just a heuristic to try on like a jacket, right? That's not the position. But Andrew's right to say, no, if you live this life, if you advocate for it, if you demand, no, I can rule through this. If you do reproduce, of course it can be pragmatic. So there's nothing that says Christianity can't also be pragmatic and true. I mean, there's no contradiction. So
well, it's just stupid. Like, what do you mean? Yes, I want to see Christianity run the world. Yes, I want to see everybody be Christian. Like, what are you even talking about? That's not even a valid position. Like, isn't that what you want? Yes. But the way you said it made it sound a way that I had an issue with, right? It's like, get out of here.
I think part of it, though, is that, like, since the 60s, especially, you had this kind of huge push for indulgence, and the baby boomers, like, ate it up. and it's gotten progressively worse since then. And I think indulgence is kind of like the religion of the day. And so now that we've had a taste of it, you get comments like that where people think that, well, we don't want Christianity to be forced on everybody. We don't want for real Christians to rule, because we still need to have some degree of indulgence, because that's what real freedom is.
Yeah, well, this is kind of a terrible argument too, right? What does that mean, forced on? What does that mean that, like, does that mean people show up with guns and they're like, you're going to be a Christian or else? Like, what is so this is kind of the pragmatic language of the leftist scumbag, isn't it? Right? I don't want you to force your religion on me. When you ask them what that means, though, what does it mean when you say me forcing your religion? Does that mean that I can't make legislation saying that homosexuals can't get married? Is that forcing my religion on you? And that's what they mean. They don't, but they kind of use the language in order to obfuscate and make it sound like jackbooted thugs are going to kick in your door and force you to worship at a cross, which is not what anybody's ever proposed. Just that's okay for you to use your moral prism to rule. That's fine. That, in fact, I insist, right? I insist that you do that. So that's the thing that gets me, is like all of that is just flowery language to kind of move away and move the goalpost away from what's being actually proposed here.
Yeah.
Any other closing thoughts? We're reaching 3 hours, which is my ultimate limit on Mixed Bag Panel. Andrew, thanks for jumping on. It's great. You now officially made all 5 mixed bags.
Well, I was having a couple of beers anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly.
I wanted to pop on and yell to Libertarian. Instead, I got to talk to this really nice guy, Chad, over here. It was great to meet you, Chad. I hope I see you again somewhere around the sphere.
And Chad, let us know again, the audience, where we can find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, I'm at Chad O. Jackson on X. Apparently I'm a simp. I keep saying that in the chat. So I don't know how I'm a simp, but do enlighten me. But yeah, at Chad O. Jackson on YouTube, X, and IG. So
awesome. I'm gonna make sure there's no super chats to ask questions for you. William Bones, 1999. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's very generous. Logan with 10 memberships. Very generous, Logan, as usual. Thank you so much. Dean Lem gifted 1 membership. Thank you so much, Dean. Daniel, he's the guy who's calling you a simp, by the way. I know Austin's principal. He has none. He's sitting on a fence. Guy's a loser. Chad, be honest. How many whiteys in your congregation? Oh, yeah. How many whiteys in your congregation, Chad?
Well, it's mostly white. I go to a Presbyterian church here in Dallas. So
yeah. I assume you do also some commentary on culture itself, like if we were to say black culture, right, in America, I assume that you've done some commentary on like the way people act, the way people dress. You're clearly impeccable. You obviously pride yourself, not in an evil way, pride, but you think impeccability is a good thing, order is a good thing. I bet you have you cringe and roll your eyes a bunch at the culture, right? If you were to, let's say you put yourself in a monolith called the black culture, you must be just, just being like, what is happening? How do you expect to elevate in any cohesive culture or society if everything about you externally says basically don't count on me? I mean, is that too brutal?
No, not at all. I mean, black culture is definitely made in a Hollywood basement for sure. The thing is like it wasn't until the late 60s and early 70s where you had this explosion of blaxploitation films, and you had a lot of things going on in entertainment and music.
Oy.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You had from James Brown, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, like this kind of assertion of quote unquote blackness. Nobody could define what the hell it was, but it was certainly something that was insisted upon, whether it be Negroes growing their hair out into large afros, wearing African garb, naming their kids weird sounding names. If you look at black families and white families and photos from the 1940s, no distinguishable difference in terms of how they dressed, in terms of the way that they carry themselves. 3 out of 4 Black children were growing up in a 2-parent household. So there's definitely been a cultural shift. Martin Luther King had a lot to do with that, because he taught Blacks how to cry and how to beg and plead and how to look at the government as a source of utopia, and how to, like, in a sense, Martin Luther King taught Blacks how to let their hands off the proverbial plow, pick up their picket signs, and demand that the government do something for us. Right. So the fact is, Cato did a study, I think in 2018, which showed that Blacks are the only ethnic group in America who has a higher view of socialism than capitalism. I think 60% of Blacks view socialism more favorably. So again, I would lay that at the feet of the civil rights movement and everything that transpired since then. And so we were taught, in a sense, how to be Black by Hollywood and by entertainment and by political activists. And so as far as Black culture is concerned, Black culture is a psyop. It just is. It's a
Well, now it's even more so. People coming out saying, "Well, no, the truth of the matter is there are even agencies, that are doing culture creation, and there could be intelligence agencies. It doesn't take much, right, to create a little what seems to be a grassroots movement. This happens even in just regular political movements, right? You could actually craft something to look grassroots and have some elements that actually are, but all you need is a couple elements that actually are, paired with a little bit of funding and a little bit of marketing guidance, and voila, you have this Black culture that you say, oh no, it's from the streets and they're just telling their story. No, nothing really pops up and percolates organically like that without a little help. And so people just don't want to maybe confront it, because it means there's more manipulation and social engineering than we think, and that means someone might call you a tinfoil hat tardo, right? And but all this stuff's coming out now, and it's like, I
definitely acknowledge the puppeteers behind it all, a lot of whom are not Black, but at the same time, the reason why I don't spend so much time identifying who those puppeteers are, or who those men behind the curtain are, is because to do so is to basically sound just like the Marxists, or just like the so-called left, namely blaming Black issues on someone else, somebody else. Oh, they made us do it.
Yeah.
LBJ made us do it. It was these, policies on, war on poverty and welfare. It's like, no, you have to already have no character to fall for a man in a house rule, or to fall for this welfare policy. So what happened to Blacks as it relates to character? So it's in order for a Black celebrity like a Nina Simone or a James Brown to be used by a Jewish or white, puppet master, they already have to have their character compromised. And so to me, James Brown and Nina Simone are just as guilty as their white or Jewish handler. You know what I mean? So it's like,
you don't want to play a game.
Where does the personal responsibility come into play?
Right. And some, we call them the name'ems, actually, the ones who, properly name the sounding names that we can't really talk about, the names that sound alike, and you go, oh, they did it, they're doing it, those people, but it's actually not even Christian. Like, you pointing and scapegoating and playing a game of who's got the right folder of scapegoats, who's the right person to blame, doesn't really help the person, the people that you're pointing to that are being used to say the pawns in this case. And a lot of that, it's like playing hot potato with a blame. Right. It's just nonsensical. And, I went through a phase of that where it was like, I'm going to list all the names and I'm going to expose the names and, tie it back to this little nation in the Middle East and we'll get them. And it's just so fruitless, right? It's just, it doesn't get anybody any further along. And so, the responsibility aspect is the way to go.
Yeah. Hugely. And I mean, to me, when I look at celebrityism, doesn't matter if it's Black, white, whatever, it all harkens back to an old tried and true Satan tactic. I mean, we saw him do it with Jesus. You know what I mean? When Jesus was in the wilderness, he took him to top of a mountain, showed him the world, and said, "All this will be yours if you would but kneel down and worship me." So it's like most people don't do what Jesus did in that situation. Most people, they bend the knee and they want all the riches, and they'll play the part and be influential and basically teach the entire society how to be degenerates with their celebrity status. And so that's what we've seen happen. And this is why, like when we're talking about Cat Williams, it's like if his motive was, hey, stop worshiping celebrities, I'll be like, okay, cool. But he wants just as much clout, just as much popularity as someone like a Kevin Hart or whomever. So it's like you're coming more from a place of covetousness and jealousy than a place of being pure and honest in what it is you're trying to do. And so it's like, while I can accept the truth of Hollywood being a cesspool, which is a lot of what you quote unquote expose in that interview, you're just as part of the cesspool as these people that you're pointing the finger at. And so again, we have to, I think that one of the things that's true of our generation is that we've learned to point at everybody else except for ourselves when it comes to the the fix that we find ourselves in. We don't know how to self-reflect. We don't know how to look at ourselves and look at how we have played a part in this mess. And so that's at least what I try to do. I try
it's called what is it? Apple Z generation, where you think you can hit Control Z, and it's like we're so used to quick fixes and the immediacy of things, and we all suffer from this. Like us being on the internet, you know, just I bet you had a little frustration when the computer didn't work properly, and we're just trained to be like, we're like, what the hell? You know, why isn't my my life effective at all moments? And that's a whole other. Actually, I would love to have you back on, because I did want to actually tonight get into modernity and some of its consequences and some of the paradoxes we exist in, holding on to something traditional and eternal and everlasting in the midst of being completely hooked up to cords and like, fully dependent on these like structures and stuff. It's just, we all experience this weird tension, and it doesn't quite feel like hypocrisy, but it's like more of like a paradox that we're fighting modernity while using the tools of modernity to warn people about modernity, and at the same time, you know what I mean? It's but that's a whole other stream. But thanks again. You're welcome on anytime. I do these every Thursday. The guests do change, so if you come back, it might not be next week, but maybe I'll gear a topic specific that you'll flourish on here. Anything else you want to say?
No, I'll leave it there. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. God bless you, Chad. Have a good evening.
All right, you too.
W in the chat for Chad. That was a great guest. Definitely going to have him back. I feel like he can jump into a lot of topics, peripheral topics, and political, cultural, technological, ethical. $15 from Tiki Tac Zen's Forehead. That's all he says. $10 from Bernie All Time. Thank you so much. Says nothing. Just a trophy. Appreciate that. Check over here. Make sure I don't have anything over here. Jortlandia Forever. Logan Daly. Thank you so much, Logan. I really appreciate you, man. So, yeah, W's in the chat. That was a good panel. I knew it was going to get a little contentious. I didn't know Jay and Austin would flare up that big, but I allow it on the show, right? So that's kind of the joy of the show, is that it's fun, and then it gets crazy, and then it gets back to fun, easygoing, and then it could get crazy again. And I kind of want to open like that. Now, I think Austin Peterson also welcome back, because I do want my go-to libertarians and centrist as a reference point. But, libertarianism, I believe, needs to be debated a lot more against, because, I thought this, and I had a conversation with Andrew, and I was like trying to discuss, trying to figure out what's worse, like the blue-haired, upside down Zer people on TikTok, or centrism or libertarianism, and he made a pretty damn good case that libertarianism is even worse. It's even worse because it's basically, he didn't phrase it like this, but this is how I visualized it, is that it's basically the soil for the plants you don't want. So the weeds are like the blue hairs, and you're like, oh, I got to keep the weeds down. You can't let these percolate up. Hopefully we outbreed them and so on. But you ask yourself, well, what's the soil for these weeds? And it really is a liberal approach, and libertarianism is quite liberal. Classical liberalism is liberalism. Liberty above all is a doctrine, is a false doctrine. It's it's not to say anyone who holds this view is satanic, but I have to say, from my view, it's a satanic view. Pursue your wants and desires above all things, so long as you don't bother anyone and they won't bother you. So it needs to be confronted, because a lot of us went through phases where we just, we're like, yeah, just gotta do your thing. Let him be. Just let him do what he wants. And wow, can that really destroy a culture? Why? And here's why. And we sometimes make this this assumption. We have this assumption that we grow up in a household that's guided by a father and taken care of by a mother. In that household, we're like, yes, Christian, and we want to embed these values, and we want prayer and all this stuff. And then we go, yeah, but once you leave, don't say any of that stuff. Don't really be vocal about it. And it's really bizarre, it's actually backwards, honestly. If it's hierarchical, if it is God, God, man, or government, down to family, woman, child, if that's true, then the starting point isn't the home. The home is an extension of the hierarchy, and this is why in Orthodoxy, I'm not sure about Catholicism, but that the home is an icon of the church. It's an extension. It's not the source of the church. It's the extension of the church. So how does a Christian not take a strong Christian position in politics that hierarchy should exist, but they have it? They give themselves that it exists at the tail end in the home. So they go from home, they skip the middle, right? And then they just let the government get run by just sort of like a general populace that's just like, well, you get your turn in there. You're going to get your turn in there. Everyone needs a turn in government. How about that? This is a weak position. It's a very weak position. Any other questions? I actually had to ban a couple people today. Just annoying people. Chase says, hopefully the next time the libertarian actually engages instead of ignoring arguments and talking over. Yeah, it was a little frustrating. And it obviously frustrated Jay, but, Jay deals with that all the time, and he's just like, dude, if you can't engage... I knew that was going to be a little bit of an issue the moment I asked for evidence of rights. I knew it was going to be a problem. So, anyway, that's it for me. Appreciate you all. We'll have more people back here. I definitely want more libertarians, more atheists. I actually cannot find... I don't care if you're offended. Atheists, where are the smarter ones? I can't just bug Pine Creek Doug every time. Tom Bombadil, thank you so much. Good night. Late to the party. Well, you missed some fun stuff, Jimmy James. Got a little wild in the middle a little bit, but that's okay. Anyway, I enjoy it. I always enjoy the show. It's my favorite part of the week as far as what I'm doing in the Squeen. You know, I like my chill live streams, hang out. I want to play some more music too live. But this is my favorite thing to do. So I'm going to keep doing it. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Good night, Jim Bob Shoulders. Yeah, I'd love to have Iron on. Poor guy. That's it for me. I'm going to play the intro. I'll do more music. Yep. Great stream. Austin's gay. Chad's a Chad. Have a good night, y'all. IG music stream. Maybe I should do that. All right. That's it for me. God bless y'all. And I'll see you on tomorrow, live streaming, noon. Thanks again for all of the very generous chats and all the generous purchases for memberships for people. I hope you all who receive a membership, I hope you feel compelled to keep it. And he says no more gays. That's it for me. Adios. God bless you all. This has been Mixed Bag Panel number 5. Good night.